The device pulsed with eerie blue light, casting unnatural shadows across the concrete bunker walls. Warning sirens blared overhead as the main monitor displayed an ominous countdown. 60, 59, 58. Tommy Miller stood transfixed before the massive machine, his 7-year-old frame dwarfed by the Cold War relic, humming with dangerous energy. The boy's eyes reflected the blue glow, unnaturally calm amid the chaos. "Tommy, we need to go now." Jack Miller reached for his son, military instincts, screaming danger. Tommy didn't move, his focus absolute on the pulsing core. "I understand it, Dad. It's scared like I get at school when there's too much noise. The entire system is overloading." Elizabeth Montgomery's voice carried practiced calm, though fear edged her words. "If we don't evacuate now, if I leave, everyone gets hurt." Tommy interrupted with certainty beyond his years, like what happened to Grandpa. Jack's eyes met Liz's across the trembling bunker. In her executive suits, in boardroom authority, she'd once seemed untouchable. Now, with dust in her hair and fear in her eyes, she looked achingly human. 50 seconds until catastrophic failure, the automated system announced dispassionately. 6 months earlier, rain drummed against the high windows of Miller's auto. Jack Miller glanced up at the darkening sky, noting the ominous wall of clouds approaching from the west. The radio crackled with an emergency broadcast interrupting the classic rock station. "This is not a drill. Hurricane Leo has changed course inland, defying all meteorological predictions. The storm is currently barreling through the Appalachian corridor with unprecedented intensity." Jack wiped his grease-stained hands on a shop rag, his movements methodical, a habit carried from his military days. 15 years with the Navy SEALs had hardened him against panic, replacing it with calm efficiency. "Tommy," he called, voice softening instinctively. "Time to pack up, buddy." In the corner of the garage, among neatly organized tools, 7-year-old Tommy Miller sat cross-legged on a worn mechanic's mat. His small fingers moved with surprising precision over a miniature robot crafted from salvaged parts. The boy didn't respond, his focus absolute, a trait that worried teachers, but filled Jack with quiet pride. "Tommy," Jack repeated, approaching carefully. "Storm's getting bad. We need to head upstairs." The boy finally looked up, blue eyes so much like his mother's, blinking, as if emerging from a trance. "Will the power go out again?" Jack nodded, crouching to his son's level. "Probably, but we've got the generator ready, and I picked up extra batteries for your nightlight." He gestured toward the robot. "How's the new project coming along?" Tommy flipped a switch on his robot, and its articulated arm moved in a smooth, controlled motion. "I fixed the servo motor. I used parts from that old printer Mrs. Larson threw away. That's my boy." Jack felt a familiar swell of wonder. How had he, a former Navy SEAL turned small-town mechanic, produced a child with such extraordinary mechanical intuition? Jack's gaze drifted to the framed photographs on the wall, a visual timeline of the Miller family legacy. His grandfather in his World War II uniform. His father in Vietnam, fatigue's arms slung around fellow soldiers, their young faces unaware of the cancer that would claim Frank Miller Sr. Decades later, a rare form linked to his classified government work in the hills outside Millbrook. The last photo showed Jack's late wife, Rebecca, holding newborn Tommy, her smile tired but radiant. 8 months later, cancer took her too, leaving Jack alone with an infant who saw the world through different eyes than most. A truck horn blared outside, pulling Jack back to the present. Sheriff Frank Wilson, 72, and still sturdy as the oak trees that lined Millbrook's Main Street, hurried through the rain toward the garage entrance, Vietnam veteran's cap pulled low against the downpour. "Jack, glad I caught you," Frank called, his voice carrying over the storm. "County's closing the Westbrook Bridge within the hour. Leo's hitting harder than anyone expected." "Thanks for the heads up." Jack nodded, reading the concern in the older man's face. Frank had been his father's best friend, served with him in Vietnam, and stepped in as a surrogate grandfather to Tommy after Jack's father passed. "You heading home now?" "Straight there. Marie's got the hurricane kit ready." Frank turned to Tommy with a warm smile. "Hey there, Professor. Building another one of your flying machines." Tommy, usually shy around adults, brightened at Frank's familiar presence. "It's a rescue robot for finding people in storms." Frank's weathered face creased into a grin. "We might just need that today, son." After Frank left, Jack shouldered Tommy's backpack alongside his toolbox. With one final look around the garage, he switched off the main lights, but left the neon Miller's auto sign glowing outside, a family tradition during storms, a beacon for anyone who might need help. 50 miles away, Elizabeth Montgomery was having what she privately termed a 5-aspirin day. The quarterly board meeting of Montgomery Technologies had run 3 hours over schedule with contentious debates about their new drone surveillance systems and Department of Defense contracts. As CEO, Liz had maintained her composure throughout the calm, collected presence that had earned her the nickname the Steel Queen of Silicon Valley. She had pushed through approval for their next-generation military drone prototype, deftly navigated shareholder concerns, and outlined their 5-year expansion strategy without betraying a hint of the migraine building behind her right temple. Now steering her Tesla Model S through worsening conditions on Interstate 76, she was finally allowing herself to feel the exhaustion. Rain lashed against the windshield with increasing ferocity, and despite the autonomous driving features, Liz kept her hands firmly on the wheel. Her GPS chirped an alert. Route adjustment recommended due to flooding conditions ahead. Liz frowned. She needed to be in Philadelphia by morning and delays weren't in her meticulously organized schedule. She accepted the alternate route and the Tesla smoothly adjusted course, exiting onto a state road that quickly narrowed as it wound into densely forested terrain. Suddenly, the car lurched, dashboard lights flickering. A warning message flashed, electromagnetic interference detected. "What the hell?" Liz muttered, gripping the wheel tighter. The car's systems went dark without warning. No lights, no power steering, nothing. In the same instant, Liz felt the wheels lose traction. The Tesla began to hydroplane, spinning toward the shoulder of the road. Everything slowed down as Liz's crisis training kicked in, skills her grandfather, the former senator, had insisted upon for all family members during the Cold War era. She turned into the skid, fighting for control, but physics was unforgiving. The Tesla slid sideways, plunging off the road and down a shallow embankment, before coming to rest at an angle, its front end buried in mud. Liz grabbed her purse and opened the door, immediately regretting her choice of footwear as her Louboutin heels sank into several inches of mud. The rain was merciless, soaking through her tailored suit within seconds. Headlights appeared through the curtain of rain, approaching slowly along the road above. A Ford pickup truck pulled over, and a tall figure emerged immediately, opening an umbrella against the deluge. "Are you hurt?" The man's voice carried easily despite the storm deep and steady. "No, I'm fine. Car just died completely." The umbrella was suddenly over her head. Mid-30s, strong jawline with watchful eyes that had seen difficult situations. He wore a flannel shirt under a weather-beaten jacket, work jeans, and boots that navigated the treacherous mud with practiced ease. "Electromagnetic pulse," he said, examining her Tesla. "Happens sometimes in these parts during big storms. Something about the mountains and the old military installations." He extended his hand. "Jack Miller. I run the garage in Millbrook, about 3 miles back." "Elizabeth Montgomery," she replied automatically. Jack circled the vehicle, methodically assessing the damage. "You're not going anywhere in this tonight. EMPs fry modern electronics. I can tow you to my shop tomorrow when it's light." In the truck's cab, a small boy sat clutching a homemade robot. He watched her with solemn blue eyes as Jack helped her into the middle seat. "This is my son, Tommy," Jack said. "Tommy, this is Miss Montgomery. Her car broke down." The boy nodded seriously. "Did it get zapped by the sky electricity that happens to cars with computers in them?" Despite everything, Liz found herself smiling. "I think it did. That's very observant of you." "Tommy's our local expert on anything with wires and circuits," Jack said with quiet pride as he started the engine. "He builds robots from scratch." "Really?" Liz glanced at the contraption in the boy's hands, noticing the surprising sophistication of its construction. "That's impressive engineering for 7," Tommy supplied. "I'm 7 3/4." Jack maneuvered the truck carefully back onto the road. "I'll come back for your car once I get you both somewhere safe. Storm's getting worse, and the Westbrook Bridge is about to close. That would cut us off from town." 10 minutes later, they reached Millbrook, a quintessential small American town with brick buildings, a white steepled church, and a town square with a Civil War memorial. The truck pulled into a lot beside a 2-story building with the neon Miller's Auto sign glowing defiantly against the darkness. Inside, Jack led them up a narrow staircase to the apartment above the garage, an open-plan living area with wooden floors and exposed brick walls, simply furnished but immaculately kept. Photographs in simple frames documented generations of the Miller family. After changing into dry clothes Jack had provided, Liz emerged to find Tommy carefully placing flashlights around the apartment while Jack checked a generator in the corner. "Bridge is officially closed," Jack announced after ending a call. "We're cut off until morning at least." Within 15 minutes, the small kitchen table was set with a simple meal. As they sat down, the apartment plunged into darkness, save for battery-powered lanterns. "Right on schedule," Jack commented dryly. "Tommy want to fire up Gerard." The boy grinned and switched on a modified generator. Soft light immediately flooded from LED strips along the ceiling edges. "Tommy designed the backup lighting system," Jack explained. "We call the generator Gerard. After Gerard Way," Tommy added seriously. "He's the singer from My Chemical Romance. Dad plays their music in the garage." The incongruity of the tough ex-military mechanic listening to emo rock startled a genuine laugh from Liz, a rare sound in her carefully controlled life. "So," Jack said as they finished eating, "Montgomery Technologies, that's your company?" Liz nodded surprised. "You've heard of us. Military contracts, drone surveillance systems. Your grandfather started it during the Cold War, if I remember right." "Liz," she corrected automatically. "And yes, my grandfather founded the company in 1953. Originally Defense Communications, then expanded into surveillance in the 70s. Tommy suddenly perked up. "You make drones like flying ones?" "Among other things," Liz replied, warming to the boy's interest. "Our newest models can stay airborne for 72 hours without refueling." "Do they have thermal cameras for finding people?" "The search and rescue models do. They can detect a human heat signature under 3 feet of rubble or dense forest canopy." "Cool," Tommy breathed, clearly impressed. "Dad, that's like what I'm trying to build, but way better." Outside, Hurricane Leo continued its assault on Millbrook, but within the warm glow of the Mills apartment, something unexpected was taking root. A connection between 3 lives that would soon uncover secrets buried for decades in the hills surrounding the small town. Morning broke over Millbrook with surprising gentleness. The fury of Hurricane Leo had passed during the night, leaving behind a landscape transformed streets turned to shallow rivers. Ancient trees toppled across power lines, debris scattered like forgotten toys. But the first rays of sunlight painted the aftermath in hues of gold, as if to soften the destruction. Liz woke to unfamiliar sounds, birds calling through open windows, the distant murmur of voices from the street below, the soft creak of old floorboards. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't place herself. The room came into focus, slowly exposed brick walls, a desk covered with technical drawings, shelves lined with disassembled electronics, and dog-eared engineering textbooks clearly not meant for second graders. Tommy's project room. The events of the previous night rushed back the storm, the disabled Tesla, the unexpected sanctuary in the apartment above Miller's auto. She sat up, running fingers through tangled hair. The borrowed clothes, oversized flannel, and a faded navy t-shirt felt strange against her skin, worlds away from the silk pajamas at her Philadelphia penthouse. Yet there was something oddly comforting about them, as if the fabric carried traces of the practical strength she'd observed in Jack Miller. The sound of voices drew her toward the kitchen. Through the doorway, she could see Jack and Tommy already engaged in what appeared to be a well-established morning routine. Tommy carefully setting plates while Jack flipped pancakes on the stovetop, but both moving with the synchronized precision of a team that needed no words. "The power grid for half the county is down," Jack was saying, his voice low and steady. "Frank says it could be 3 to 5 days before they get everything back online." Tommy nodded seriously as if processing complex tactical information. "Gerard can run for 72 hours on the fuel we have. I calculated it last month. That's my little engineer." Jack ruffled his son's hair, a gesture so tender it seemed almost incongruous with his strong hands and military bearing. Liz stepped into the kitchen, suddenly self-conscious about her disheveled appearance. "Good morning." Both Millers turned. Tommy offered a shy smile while Jack's expression remained carefully neutral, though his eyes reflected a brief flicker of something Liz couldn't quite identify. "Coffee?" he asked, gesturing toward a percolator on the counter, the old-fashioned kind Liz had only seen in vintage movies. "Please, though, I should be asking if there's anything I can do to help." Jack shook his head. "We've got a system." He poured coffee into a chipped mug with "World's Okayest Mechanic" printed on the side and handed it to her. "Pancakes are almost ready. Tommy insists on making them after every storm tradition since he was 4. Because they're circles of stability in the chaos, Tommy said matter-of-factly, arranging silverware with precise angles. That's what Mom used to say. A shadow crossed Jack's face there and gone so quickly Liz might have imagined it. That's right, buddy. That's exactly what she said. The moment hung between them, fragile and intimate. Liz felt like an intruder witnessing something precious in private. But before she could retreat, Tommy turned to her with unexpected directness. Do you like blueberries in your pancakes, Ms. Montgomery? We picked them last summer and froze them. The simple question, so ordinary and yet so welcoming, caught Liz off guard. When was the last time anyone had asked about her food preferences without an agenda? Her executive assistants arranged meals based on scheduling efficiency. Board members selected restaurants calculated to impress or intimidate. Even her rare dates involved carefully chosen venues meant to signal status and influence. I love blueberries, she found herself saying, and please call me Liz. Breakfast unfolded with surprising ease, the conversation flowing naturally from storm damage to Tommy's school projects to the mechanical issues with Liz's Tesla. Jack explained that electromagnetic pulses occasionally affected electronics in the region, a phenomenon locals had learned to live with, but that continued to baffle outside experts. It's the mountains, Tommy added through a mouthful of pancake. They trap the energy from storms and bounce it back like a giant echo chamber. Jack raised an eyebrow. That's a theory, buddy. Nobody knows for sure. The government knows, Tommy replied with absolute certainty. They studied it during the Cold War. Ms. Johnson at the library told me. Jack exchanged a glance with Liz, something unspoken passing between them. Ms. Johnson has a vivid imagination and too much time reading conspiracy websites. But Dad, remember when your old commander visited, he said. Tommy, Jack interrupted gently but firmly, why don't you show Liz your drone designs after breakfast? I bet she could give you some professional feedback. The boy's eyes lit up, storm theories forgotten in the excitement of sharing his passion with someone who might understand. Really, you wouldn't mind? Liz found herself smiling at his enthusiasm. I'd be honored, though I should check in with my office first, see how long I'm going to be stranded here. The landline's working, Jack said, rising to clear plates. But cell service is still down. And from what I heard on the radio, the Westbrook Bridge took structural damage. Could be days before it's passable. Liz calculated rapidly. The board meeting in Philadelphia, the defense contractor presentations, the quarterly projections that needed finalizing. All of it suddenly seemed distant, as if belonging to another life entirely. I need to let my team know I'm all right, at least. Jack nodded toward the ancient corded phone on the wall. Help yourself. I'll take a look at your car once I check the garage for flooding. The storm surge came pretty close to the building. After a brief call to a relieved Megan, who promised to reschedule the most critical meetings, Liz found herself seated at Tommy's desk watching in growing amazement as the boy presented his drone designs. His sketches showed remarkable spatial awareness and mechanical intuition for someone his age, complete with carefully labeled components and power calculations that would challenge many engineering undergrads. This is the search module, Tommy explained, pointing to a detailed drawing of what looked like a sophisticated sensor array. It can find heat signatures through walls, but I can't figure out how to make it small enough to fit on my prototype. Liz studied the design, genuinely impressed. Have you considered a distributed network approach? Instead of one big sensor, you could use multiple smaller ones working together. Tommy's eyes widened. Like a hive mind for drones? Exactly. That's actually similar to how our newest models work. For the next hour, they lost themselves in technical discussions, Liz occasionally simplifying complex engineering concepts but never talking down to the boy. Tommy absorbed everything with remarkable comprehension, asking questions that revealed not just intelligence, but a genuine innovator's mindset. You know, Liz said, as Tommy showed her a small working prototype built from salvaged parts, many of my engineers with advanced degrees couldn't build something this sophisticated with proper equipment, let alone from scratch. Tommy beamed the praise, clearly meaningful, coming from someone who understood what he'd accomplished. Dad helps with the soldering sometimes, but he says the ideas are all mine. He's right. Liz carefully held the drone, noting the elegant simplicity of its design. You have a natural gift, Tommy. Mom was an engineer. he said, suddenly solemn. Dad says I got her brain. And what does your dad do? Besides run the garage, I mean. Tommy considered this, head tilted. He fixes things, not just cars. People too sometimes. When Sheriff Frank gets sad about the war, Dad talks to him. And when Billy's dad lost his job at the paper mill, Dad found him work and didn't tell anyone he was helping. The simple assessment offered a glimpse into Jack Miller that surprised Liz. In her world, such quiet generosity was rare. Charity came with press releases and tax benefits carefully calculated for maximum return on investment. Your dad seems like a good man. Tommy nodded seriously. The best, even though he gets sad sometimes when he thinks I can't see. Before Liz could respond to this unexpectedly perceptive observation, footsteps on the stairs announced Jack's return. He appeared in the doorway, clothes damp from the receding floodwaters, a smudge of grease across one cheek. Garage survived mostly intact, he reported. But I've got bad news about your car, Liz. She steeled herself, expecting the worst. Total loss. Not quite that bad. The main control module is fried along with half the car's computer systems. I've called around, but the nearest Tesla-certified parts are in Pittsburgh, and with the bridge out, how long? Jack ran a hand through his short hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. 5 days minimum, maybe longer if more storms hit. We're expecting aftershocks from Leo throughout the week. 5 days stranded in Millbrook. Under normal circumstances, such a delay would have triggered immediate crisis management, chartered helicopters, emergency workarounds, an entire support team mobilized to minimize disruption. Instead, Liz found herself strangely untroubled by the prospect. I suppose I'll need to find somewhere to stay then. Is there a hotel in town? The Millbrook Inn closed 3 years ago, Jack said. Nearest accommodations would be in Westbrook on the other side of the bridge. The Wilsons have a guest room, Tommy suggested. Sheriff Frank's wife makes amazing cookies. Jack shook his head slightly. Marie's sister is staying with them this month. He hesitated, then added, You're welcome to continue using our spare room. It's nothing fancy, but it's clean, and you'd have privacy to work remotely once the internet comes back. The offer was delivered with such straightforward practicality that Liz found herself nodding before fully considering the implications. That's very generous. I insist on contributing, though, for food and utilities at least. We don't need... I'm not in the habit of imposing without compensation, Mr. Miller. A hint of amusement flickered in his eyes. Back to Mr. Miller, are we? I thought we'd graduated to first names over blueberry pancakes. The gentle teasing caught her off guard, softening her corporate reflex. Sorry, force of habit, Jack, but I'm serious about contributing. Tell you what, he countered, you can help Tommy with his drone project. He's been stuck on the navigation system for weeks, and I'm more of a mechanical guy than a software engineer. Deal. Liz extended her hand formally as if closing a business negotiation. Jack's grip was warm and solid, calloused palms speaking of practical work rather than boardroom politicking. Something shifted in that brief contact, a mutual recognition perhaps of unexpected common ground, despite their different worlds. The next 3 days fell into a rhythm neither of them could have anticipated. Mornings began with simple breakfast at the kitchen table, local news on the radio providing updates on recovery efforts. Jack would head down to the garage where a steady stream of Millbrook residents arrived, with storm-damaged vehicles and grateful offerings of home-cooked meals or handcrafted items. Nobody has much cash, he explained when Liz asked about his payment policy. We work on a modified barter system during crises. Mrs. Chen's chicken pot pie is worth at least a new alternator installation. Liz spent her mornings on the landline managing Montgomery Technologies remotely with a patience that surprised her executive team. Afternoons were devoted to Tommy's drone project, the work providing unexpected satisfaction as they refined his designs with elements borrowed from Montgomery's commercial models. In the evenings after Tommy went to bed, Liz and Jack would sit in comfortable silence on the small balcony overlooking Main Street watching the community rebuild. Sometimes they talked careful conversations that skirted personal territory, but gradually revealed shared perspectives on resilience, responsibility, and purpose. On the 4th day, with cell service partially restored and the internet functioning intermittently, Liz received an urgent video call request from her CFO. She set up her laptop at the kitchen table while Jack and Tommy worked on rewiring part of the building's electrical system damaged during the storm. "Elizabeth, we have a situation." Howard Barrett's face on the screen showed the strain of sleepless nights, his normally impeccable appearance rumpled around the edges. "The Pentagon is threatening to pull the surveillance drone contract if we don't address the targeting system failure from last week's demonstration." Liz frowned. "I thought R&D had that under control." "They thought they did, but the backup systems failed during yesterday's test. The DoD rep is questioning our entire platform architecture." Howard leaned closer to the camera, lowering his voice. "Westland is already circling, suggesting to the committee that our technology is fundamentally flawed." She felt a familiar tension headache building. Westland Defense Systems had been Montgomery's primary competitor for decades, their rivalry extending back to her grandfather's time. The drone contract represented over $300 million in projected revenue. Losing it would devastate their quarterly numbers and potentially trigger a shareholder revolt. "Send me the test data and technical reports. I'll review them today." "There's more," Howard continued. "Richard Carmichael is personally overseeing Westland's campaign to discredit us. He's claiming our targeting algorithms have a catastrophic flaw that we've concealed from the department." Richard Carmichael, Westland's aggressive CEO and Liz's former fiancé, a relationship that had ended abruptly when she discovered his attempt to access proprietary Montgomery Technologies research through their personal connection. The memory still burned. "He's desperate because our system is better, and he knows it," Liz replied, keeping her voice level despite the spike of anger. "Have the engineering team focus on the backup routing protocol. That's always been the weak point." As she ended the call, Liz became aware of a presence behind her. Jack stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Military contracts," he said, not quite a question. "Sounds serious." "Just business complications." Liz closed her laptop, suddenly uncomfortable with how much he might have overheard. "Nothing I can't handle from here." Jack studied her for a moment. "Tommy's finished rewiring the main panel. We've got full power back to the building now. I need to head into town for supplies emergency committee meeting at the town hall afterward." "You're welcome to join us. See how a small town handles disaster recovery." The invitation seemed casual, but something in his tone suggested it mattered. An offering of inclusion, perhaps. "I'd like that." Millbrook's town hall stood at the center of the square, its colonial architecture a testament to the community's deep roots. Inside, about 30 residents had gathered, their faces showing fatigue but determined resolve. Jack was greeted with nods of respect as he entered, with Liz finding seats near the back of the room. Mayor Helen Davis, a silver-haired woman with commanding presence despite her small stature, called the meeting to order. "As of this morning, we have power restored to 60% of homes. The water treatment plant is back online, though we're still advising boiling water as a precaution." "Frank, what's the status on the bridge?" Sheriff Wilson stood cap in hand. "Engineers say it'll be at least another week. The central support column took more damage than initially thought. They're bringing in specialized equipment from Pittsburgh, but with roads still partially flooded to the north." The meeting continued, with each community leader reporting their area's status and needs. Liz found herself impressed by the efficient, no-nonsense approach. These people had limited resources, but maximized them through coordination and shared purpose, something many corporate boards with billions in assets failed to achieve. When Jack's turn came, he spoke briefly about mechanical repairs prioritized for emergency vehicles and medical transportation. Then unexpectedly, he turned toward Liz. "Some of you have met Elizabeth Montgomery, who's staying with Tommy and me until her car can be repaired. She's offered to help with satellite communications if we continue having issues with the main towers." All eyes turned to Liz, curious but not unwelcoming. Mayor Davis nodded appreciatively. "That's generous, Ms. Montgomery. We can certainly use expertise in that area." "Happy to help however I can," Liz replied, surprised by Jack's mention of her offer, a casual comment she'd made the previous evening about Montgomery Technologies' emergency communication systems. After the meeting adjourned, residents approached to introduce themselves. Martha from the diner insisted Liz stop by for a proper meal once they reopened. Ed from the tow service promised to prioritize retrieving her Tesla once the roads cleared. Bill from the hardware store offered any supplies she might need. "On the house we pay our debts" in Millbrook. Throughout these interactions, Jack remained nearby, occasionally adding context, but mostly letting Liz navigate the conversations herself. She found herself oddly touched by his silent support, so different from the carefully orchestrated networking events that dominated her professional life. As they walked back toward the garage through streets still lined with debris, Jack glanced sideways at her. You handled that well. Small towns can be suspicious of outsiders, especially ones with big city credentials. I grew up in a place not unlike this, Liz admitted. Before my grandfather moved the family to Philadelphia when I was 12, I still remember what community feels like. And yet you built your life in the corporate world. We don't always choose our legacies, Jack. Sometimes they choose us. He nodded, seeming to understand more than she'd explicitly said. Tommy wants to show you his latest modification to the drone when we get back. He's been working on it all day, barely stopped for lunch. He's remarkable, you know. His spatial reasoning and systems thinking are off the charts. Pride warmed Jack's expression. Rebecca, his mother, was the same way. Could visualize complex structures in her head, see how all the pieces would fit together before they were built. You must miss her. The words slipped out before Liz could consider their propriety. Jack was quiet for several steps. Every day, he finally said, but mostly for Tommy's sake. He deserves to have known her. The simple honesty of his grief touched something in Liz. In her world, vulnerability was weaponized emotions concealed behind strategic masks. Jack's straightforward acknowledgement of loss felt refreshingly authentic. They turned onto Main Street, now bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. Ahead, Miller's Auto stood with its neon sign glowing against the darkening sky, a beacon of normalcy amid the storm's aftermath. A small figure burst from the side door, running toward them with unusual urgency. Tommy, his face alight with excitement, waved a tablet in one hand. Dad, Liz, come quick, my drone found something. Jack's pace quickened, immediately responding to his son's excitement. What do you mean, buddy? What did it find? I was testing the thermal sensor on the prototype, Tommy explained breathlessly as they reached him. Flying it over the old fairgrounds like you said I could, and it picked up something weird underground, a hot spot where nothing should be hot. Probably just damaged electrical lines, Jack suggested. The county facilities manager should check it out tomorrow. No, Dad, it's not electrical. Tommy's certainty was absolute. It's under the section where they never let anyone go behind the exhibition hall. And look, he thrust the tablet toward them. The screen showed a thermal image overlaid on a map of the fairgrounds. A distinct heat signature pulsed beneath what appeared to be an unused section of the property, its regular pattern suggesting something mechanical rather than a natural phenomenon. Jack's expression changed subtly, a tightening around the eyes, a slight shift in stance that Liz recognized from her work with military personnel. The posture of someone assessing a potential threat. Tommy, did you land the drone? Is it back home? Yes, it's in my room. But Dad, don't you see this could be— We'll talk about it inside, Jack interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. It's getting dark, and you haven't had dinner. As they entered the apartment, Tommy racing ahead to retrieve his drone, Jack held Liz back with a light touch on her arm. Sorry about this, he said quietly. Tommy gets fixated on mysteries. The fairgrounds have been abandoned for years, probably just old equipment breaking down. But something in his tone didn't match the casual dismissal of his words. Liz had spent years reading people across negotiation tables, detecting the minute tells that signaled hidden concerns. You don't believe that, she observed. You're worried about what he found. Jack met her gaze directly, something shifting in his expression, a decision being made. There's history in those hills that doesn't appear in tourist brochures. Military testing sites from the Cold War era. Most were decommissioned decades ago, but some might still contain active systems. Liz finished, her mind racing. Systems that could generate electromagnetic fields strong enough to disable modern electronics during storms. Before Jack could respond, Tommy reappeared, a prototype drone cradled carefully in his hands. Look what else I found. When I zoomed in on the heat signature, the drone's compass went crazy, spinning in circles. And I got this weird static on all frequencies. He placed the drone on the kitchen table and tapped the tablet, bringing up an audio file. The sound that emerged was unlike ordinary radio interference, a rhythmic pattern of pulses and pauses that raised the hair on the back of Liz's neck. That's not random static, she said slowly. Recognition dawning. That's a data transmission. Encrypted but definitely man-made. Tommy nodded vigorously. That's what I thought. It's talking to something. Jack reached for the tablet, studying the thermal image with growing concern. The pattern looks familiar. It should, Tommy said with the excitement of discovery. It matches the logo on Liz's company papers. Both adults froze, eyes meeting across the table in sudden understanding. Tommy pointed to the corner of a document extending from Liz's laptop case, the distinctive Montgomery Technologies emblem, a stylized bird of prey clutching a lightning bolt. See, the heat signature makes the same shape underground. And look at this. Tommy pulled up another image on the tablet, a faded photograph he'd apparently taken of an old document. The heading was barely legible: Project Nighthawk Phase 2 Implementation, Montgomery Industries, 1972. I found it at the library last month when researching electromagnetic fields for science class. Ms. Johnson showed me the local history archives. There was a whole folder about something called Project Nighthawk that happened here in the 70s with this same bird symbol. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Liz stared at the document, mind racing to connect these unexpected dots. Her grandfather had founded Montgomery Industries during the height of the Cold War, specializing in communications technology for the Department of Defense. But Project Nighthawk wasn't something she'd ever encountered in the company archives or historical records. Tommy, Jack said carefully, why didn't you tell me about this research before? The boy shrugged. I was going to show you when I had more information. Scientists need complete data before making presentations. Jack ran a hand over his face, a gesture Liz now recognized as his response to stress. Buddy, I need you to pack up your drone and tablet. We're going to have Sheriff Frank take a look at what you found. Are we in trouble? Tommy asked, suddenly uncertain. No, absolutely not, Jack assured him. You did exactly what a good researcher should do. But this might be connected to something important, something adults need to handle carefully. As Tommy gathered his equipment, Jack turned to Liz, his expression now guarded in a way it hadn't been before. Montgomery Industries, he said quietly. Your family's company before it became Montgomery Technologies. Liz nodded slowly. My grandfather's defense contractor, business during the Cold War. But I've never heard of Project Nighthawk. I have. Jack's voice had taken on a new edge. My father worked at a classified installation in these hills from 1969 to 1973. He never spoke about the detailed security clearance, but he mentioned a project code name once when his illness made him delirious near the end. Nighthawk. The implications hung between them, altering the tentative connection they had been building over the past days. Jack, I don't know what this is, but the cancer that killed my father was rare, a type linked to radiation exposure. 6 other men who worked at the same facility died of similar causes over the next decade. The government denied any connection, classified all the medical records. Liz felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her, the comfortable rhythm of the past days suddenly complicated by shadows from a shared history neither had recognized. I need to make some calls, she said. My access to the company archives might help clarify what this project involved. Jack studied her for a long moment, as if reassessing everything he thought he knew about her. Your grandfather's company may have been responsible for whatever is still active under those hills, whatever caused the electromagnetic pulse that disabled your car during the storm. The unspoken question hung between them. Did she already know? Was her presence in Millbrook more than the random chance it appeared to be? I knew nothing about this, Liz said firmly, meeting his gaze. But I intend to find out everything I can. If Montgomery Industries left something dangerous behind, I have a responsibility to address it. Tommy returned with his equipment packed carefully in his backpack, oblivious to the tension between the adults. Are we going to see Sheriff Frank now? Can Liz come too? She knows about the bird symbol. Jack glanced at Liz, a complex mix of emotions crossing his face, suspicion warring with the trust they'd begun to build. Finally, he nodded once. Yes, Liz is coming with us. I think it's time we all learned exactly what Project Nighthawk was and why it's as suddenly active again after 50 years. The dynamics between them had irrevocably shifted. What had begun as a simple story of a stranded traveler and a small-town mechanic had transformed into something far more complex, a mystery connecting their families across decades with Tommy's innocent discovery as the catalyst. As they prepared to leave, Liz caught Jack watching her with new awareness, his earlier openness now tempered with caution. The easy companionship of recent days hadn't disappeared, but it had been complicated by this unexpected revelation. Whatever happened next would test the fragile connection forming between them and potentially expose secrets neither was fully prepared to confront. Part 3: Building Relationships and Revelations. Sheriff Frank Wilson's office occupied the rear section of Millbrook's modest police station, a two-room affair with a single holding cell that hadn't seen an overnight guest in years. The walls were lined with faded photographs chronicling the town's history: Main Street circa 1920, the original Westbrook Bridge dedication, and a collection of officers dating back to the department's founding. Frank looked up from his ancient desktop computer as Jack, Tommy, and Liz entered, his weathered face creasing into a smile that faltered slightly when he registered their expressions. "Three visitors at once," he said, rising from his desk. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Jack placed a hand on Tommy's shoulder. "Show him what you found, buddy." With careful precision, Tommy laid his tablet on the sheriff's desk and pulled up the thermal imagery. "My drone picked this up at the old fairgrounds behind the exhibition hall where nobody goes." Frank's reaction was subtle but unmistakable, a tightening around the eyes, a momentary stillness that betrayed recognition. He glanced briefly at Jack, something unspoken passing between them before examining the image more closely. "Interesting heat pattern," he said neutrally. "Could be old equipment breaking down. County's been meaning to demolish those structures for years." "It's not just heat," Tommy continued, swiping to the audio recording. "Listen." The rhythmic pulses filled the small office, their pattern too regular to be random interference. Frank's expression hardened as he listened, decades seeming to fall away from his bearing, the casual small-town sheriff replaced by the military man he had once been. "Where exactly did you record this?" His voice had shifted to something more official. Tommy pulled up a map on the tablet, pointing to a location behind the main exhibition hall. "Right here." The drone's compass went crazy, too, spinning in circles like it couldn't find north. Frank straightened, his decision visibly made. "Jack, can I have a word in private?" "Anything you need to say, you can say in front of all of us," Jack replied, his tone making it clear this wasn't negotiable. "Tommy found this. He deserves to know what it means." The sheriff's gaze shifted to Liz, assessing. "And Ms. Montgomery." "She might have relevant information," Jack said. "Her grandfather's company was involved in whatever Project Nighthawk was." Frank's eyebrows rose slightly. "Montgomery, I should have made the connection." He studied Liz with renewed interest. "Any relation to Senator James Montgomery?" "My grandfather," Liz confirmed, "though I'm learning there may be aspects of his work I wasn't aware of." Frank seemed to weigh his options before sighing heavily. He moved to the office door, closing it firmly and turning the lock. "What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room," he began, returning to his desk. "Much of it is still technically classified, though God knows if anyone at the Pentagon even remembers these old projects anymore." He pulled open a drawer, removing a metal key that hung around his neck on a chain. The key unlocked a filing cabinet in the corner, from which he extracted a worn manila folder stamped with faded red letters, "Restricted Access." In 1969, the Department of Defense established a research facility in the hills outside Millbrook. Frank began, his voice taking on the cadence of someone reciting a long-memorized briefing. Officially, it was designated as a communications relay station. In reality, it was a test site for experimental technologies, specifically directed electromagnetic pulse weapons. Tommy leaned forward, fascinated. "Like EMPs from nuclear bombs, but without the radiation?" Frank nodded, visibly impressed by the boy's knowledge. "Exactly. The military wanted weapons that could disable enemy electronics without causing nuclear fallout. Your grandfather's company, Montgomery Industries, was the primary contractor." He spread several documents on the desk: site maps, technical diagrams, and photographs of equipment Liz didn't recognize. Project Nighthawk was their most advanced prototype, a focused EMP generator that could theoretically disable specific targets while leaving friendly systems untouched. The technology was decades ahead of its time. "And my father worked on this project," Jack said, not quite a question. Frank's expression softened with old sorrow. Frank Sr. was one of the lead engineers brought in for his expertise with power systems. He didn't know the full scope, initially compartmentalized security, but he figured it out eventually. What happened? Liz asked, studying a photograph of a massive underground chambers filled with equipment bearing the Montgomery Industries logo, the same stylized bird Tommy had identified. Frank hesitated, glancing at Tommy. Jack shook his head slightly. No secrets, Frank. He needs to understand. The sheriff sighed. In 1972, there was an incident. The main Nighthawk prototype experienced what the official report called a containment failure during a test. 5 men died, 3 researchers and 2 local technicians. The project was immediately classified to the facility supposedly decommissioned. Supposedly, say, Liz prompted. Your grandfather personally oversaw the shutdown. Frank continued, addressing Liz directly. Senator Montgomery had tremendous influence with the Pentagon. The official story was that all equipment was removed, the facility sealed, but local phenomena suggested otherwise. The electromagnetic anomalies during storms, Jack said, they've been happening for decades. Frank nodded. We've had unexplained equipment failures, compass disturbances, and radio interference in that area since '72. Most folks just accepted it as one of Millbrook's quirks. But some of us suspected the Nighthawk system was never fully deactivated, just contained and buried. Tommy, who had been listening with remarkable patience, pointed to the thermal image. So this heat signature means it's waking up. Why now, after all this time? The simple question hung in the air, its implications unsettling. Frank exchanged a concerned glance with Jack before answering. That's what worries me, son. These systems were designed to remain dormant until activated by specific signal patterns. If it's becoming active again after 50 years, someone must be sending those activation signals. Liz finished, the pieces falling into place, deliberately trying to wake it up. Jack's expression darkened. The timing seems suspicious, right after a major storm disrupts the region's infrastructure and communication. An uncomfortable silence filled the office as they each processed the implications. Finally, Frank gathered the documents, returning them to the folder. I'll need to notify some old contacts at the Pentagon, he said. There's a containment protocol for situations like this. In the meantime, that section of the fairgrounds is strictly off limits. He fixed Tommy with a gentle but serious look. No more drone flights over that area, understand, even for scientific research. Tommy nodded solemnly. Yes, sir. But what about the people who might be trying to wake it up? Shouldn't we try to find them? That's a job for professionals, buddy, Jack said firmly. Not for us. As they prepared to leave, Frank held Jack back momentarily. Your father would be proud of that boy, he said quietly. Same sharp mind, same determination to understand things. And the same knack for finding trouble, Jack replied with a wry smile that didn't reach his eyes. Outside the police station, the evening air had cooled, bringing the fresh scent of rain-washed earth. Main Street was quiet, most residents still focused on storm recovery rather than normal routines. As they walked back toward Miller's auto, Tommy ran ahead to examine a fallen tree branch, giving the adults a moment of privacy. You knew about Project Nighthawk, Liz said, not an accusation, but a statement of fact. Before Tommy showed us the thermal images. Jack's pace slowed slightly. I knew my father worked on a classified project that eventually killed him. I knew it had something to do with electromagnetic technology. The details were always sketchy, security clearances, confidentiality agreements that lasted beyond the grave. I'm sorry, Liz said simply, about your father. It was a long time ago. Not to you, not to Tommy, who never got to meet his grandfather. Jack glanced at her, surprise flickering across his features, perhaps at her perception, or perhaps at the genuine empathy in her voice. What will you do now? He asked. This connection to your family's company can't be comfortable. Liz considered the question carefully. In the corporate world, her response would have been automatic damage control, legal protections, public relations strategy. But standing on Millbrook's quiet Main Street, watching Tommy examine his discovery with scientific curiosity, those reflexes felt hollow. I need to know the truth, she said finally. Whatever my grandfather's role in this was, whatever Montgomery Industries did or didn't do, I need to understand it. Not to protect the company's image, but because it's the right thing to do. Something shifted in Jack's expression, a reassessment, perhaps, or the easing of a concern he hadn't voiced. I'd like to help, he said, for my father's sake and for Tommy's. He's growing up in this town and surrounded by whatever legacy Project Nighthawk left behind. They had reached Miller's Auto, the neon sign casting a warm glow in the gathering dusk. Tommy waited by the side entrance, his excitement about the discovery now tempered with the seriousness of Frank's warnings. "Can we still work on the drone tomorrow?" he asked as they climbed the stairs to the apartment. "Not flying it over the fairgrounds, just improving the sensors." "Of course," Liz replied before Jack could answer. "We still have the navigation system to finish." The boy's face brightened. "And maybe you can tell me more about Montgomery Technologies' drones for comparison purposes." "Scientific research," Jack said with a faint smile ruffling his son's hair. "Go get cleaned up for dinner, Professor." As Tommy disappeared down the hallway, Jack turned to Liz, his expression growing serious again. "I should warn you, this town has long memories. Once word gets out about the Montgomery connection to Project Nighthawk, you might face some hostility. Several families here lost people to those rare cancers over the years." "I understand," Liz replied, "and I don't expect special treatment. If my family's company is responsible for harm done to this community, that responsibility extends to me." Jack studied her for a moment as if seeing something new. "Most corporate executives I've met don't talk that way." "I'm not most corporate executives." The simple statement carried more weight than she'd intended, revealing something of her own struggle with the Montgomery legacy. Jack nodded once, accepting this. "I'll start dinner. It's my turn to cook, and I make a mean pasta sauce." The moment of tension passed, replaced by the comfortable domesticity they'd established over the past days. Yet beneath the surface, something fundamental had shifted. Their connection deepened by shared purpose rather than mere circumstance. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Tommy's project room, illuminating the controlled chaos of his workspace. Liz sat cross-legged on the floor, her laptop balanced precariously amidst components and tools, while Tommy methodically tested modifications to his drone's navigation system. "Try running the simulation now," she suggested, watching as the boy initiated a virtual flight path on his tablet. The drone's programmed route appeared as a blue line across a map of Millbrook, smoothly avoiding obstacles and maintaining stable altitude despite simulated wind disturbances. "It works," Tommy exclaimed, eyes bright with achievement. "The distributed processing makes it so much more efficient." "Exactly," Liz agreed. "Instead of one big computer making all the decisions, you've got multiple smaller systems working together, each handling what it does best." "Like a team," Tommy said thoughtfully. "Different specialists combining their skills." "That's a perfect analogy." The boy tilted his head, considering something. "Is that how your company works? Everyone doing their special part?" Liz found herself smiling at the unexpected question. "In theory, yes, though sometimes the teams don't communicate as well as your drone systems do. Dad says communication is the hardest part of any operation. That's why his unit in the Navy practiced talking more than shooting." "Your dad is a wise man." Tommy nodded seriously. "The wisest. He doesn't talk about his Navy time much, but sometimes he teaches me things from it, like how to stay calm when everything gets crazy and how to make quick decisions that won't hurt people." Liz felt a twinge of respect at this glimpse into Jack's parenting approach, practical wisdom distilled from difficult experience, passed on without the trauma that had forged it. "You're lucky to have him," she said softly. "I know." Tommy focused on adjusting a small component, his fingers delicate and precise. "He gets sad sometimes, though, about Mom and about the bad mission." "Bad mission?" Tommy nodded without looking up. "His last one before he came home. Something went wrong and people got hurt. He doesn't think I know, but I heard him talking to Sheriff Frank once. He said he made the wrong call and it haunts him." The casual revelation struck Liz deeply. Jack Miller, steady, capable, principled, carried his own burden of perceived failure, just as she carried the weight of the Montgomery legacy. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of the apartment door opening, followed by Jack's voice calling from the kitchen. "Tommy, Liz, you've got visitors." They emerged from the project room to find Martha from the diner and Bill from the hardware store standing in the living area, arms laden with bags and boxes. "We heard you folks were working on something special," Martha announced, placing a large container on the kitchen counter. "Figured you might need supplies and sustenance." "Martha's brought her famous chicken pot pie," Bill added, setting down a box of electronic components. And I scrounged up some parts that might help with the drone project Tommy's been talking about. Liz watched in amazement as the simple delivery transformed into an impromptu gathering. Within minutes, the kitchen was filled with conversation and laughter as Martha insisted on serving lunch, while Bill and Tommy eagerly examined the salvaged electronics. Jack moved comfortably among them, his quiet presence anchoring the spontaneous community. "It's always like this," a voice said beside her. Liz turned to find an elderly woman she recognized from the town meeting. "Millbrook takes care of its own, and right now that includes you, dear." The simple inclusion so freely given without agenda or expectation touched something in Liz that had been dormant for years. In Philadelphia, her social interactions were carefully curated affairs, strategic alignments rather than genuine connections. Here in this small apartment above a garage, she was being offered something far more valuable: belonging. As the gathering continued, Liz found herself drawn into conversations about the town's history, the ongoing recovery efforts, and surprisingly insightful questions about drone technology from residents eager to understand Tommy's project. No one mentioned Project Nighthawk or the Montgomery connection either. The news hadn't spread, or these people had decided it didn't matter for now. Later, as the last visitors departed and Tommy disappeared into his room to experiment with the new components, Liz helped Jack clean up the kitchen. "That happens often," she asked, placing leftovers in containers. "Community is Millbrook's survival strategy," Jack replied. "Has been since the mills closed in the 90s. We don't have much individually, but together we make do." "It's remarkable, and somewhat foreign to someone from my world." Jack raised an eyebrow. "You don't have community in Philadelphia." "I have a network, strategic relationships, professional connections." Liz handed him a plate to dry. "It's not the same thing." "Sounds lonely." The simple observation caught her off guard. Was it lonely? She'd never really considered her life in those terms, measuring success by achievements and influence rather than connection. "It's efficient," she said finally, "though perhaps less satisfying than I've been willing to admit." Jack's hands stilled momentarily, his eyes meeting hers with unexpected intensity. "Thank you for what you're doing with Tommy. The drone project means a lot to him, especially having someone who understands the technical aspects better than I can." "He's extraordinary, Jack. His mind works in ways that most trained engineers would envy. Like his mother." A shadow of old grief crossed his features. Rebecca saw patterns where others saw chaos. It made her brilliant at structural engineering, but sometimes difficult in relationships. She'd get so focused on a project that the world would disappear around her. "Tommy has that same focus," Liz observed. "But he also has your steadiness, your awareness of people. It's an unusual combination." Jack seemed surprised by the assessment, as if seeing his son through new eyes. "I never thought of it that way." Their conversation was interrupted by the ringing of the landline. Jack answered, his expression shifting from casual to concerned as he listened. "We'll be right there," he said, finally hanging up. That was Frank. He's received a preliminary response from his Pentagon contact about Project Nighthawk. "Wants us to come to the station." Us. His exact words were, "Bring Ms. Montgomery, she needs to hear this firsthand." Sheriff Wilson's office seemed smaller with 5 people crowded inside. Besides Frank, Jack, Tommy, and Liz, a severe-looking woman in her 60s occupied the visitor's chair, her military posture and assessing gaze marking her as something other than a small-town official. "This is Dr. Eleanor Hayes," Frank introduced her, formerly with the Department of Defense, now a consultant on legacy technological containment. She was part of the original Nighthawk Oversight Committee. Dr. Hayes nodded curtly. When Frank contacted the Pentagon about unusual activity at the Millbrook site, several alarm bells rang. "I was dispatched immediately." Her gaze settled on Liz. "Montgomery, I worked with your grandfather. Brilliant man, but not always aware of the long-term implications of his innovations." "I'm learning that might be a family trait," Liz replied evenly. A ghost of a smile touched the older woman's lips. "Indeed." She turned to Tommy, her severe expression softening slightly. "And you must be the young scientist who detected the activation signatures. Impressive work, especially with homemade equipment." Tommy straightened, clearly pleased by the recognition. "Thank you, ma'am." "Dr. Hayes has reviewed the data Tommy collected," Frank explained. "She believes the Nighthawk system wasn't just accidentally triggered by the storm. Someone is deliberately attempting to reactivate it." For what purpose? Jack asked. Technology from 50 years ago can't have much military value today. Dr. Hayes shook her head. That's where you are wrong, Mr. Miller. Project Nighthawk was decades ahead of its time, too advanced in fact, which was part of the problem. It wasn't just designed to create electromagnetic pulses. It was attempting to harness and direct electromagnetic energy in ways we still haven't fully mastered today. She removed a tablet from her briefcase displaying a technical diagram that resembled a more sophisticated version of the drawings in Frank's folder. The Nighthawk prototype could theoretically manipulate electromagnetic fields with extraordinary precision, not just disrupting electronics, but potentially controlling them from a distance. The military applications were obvious, but the risks proved catastrophic. The containment failure in '72, Liz said. It wasn't a simple mechanical failure, Dr. Hayes clarified. The system began exhibiting unexpected behaviors, adapting its programming, modifying its outputs without operator commands, almost as if it were developing a rudimentary form of independent function. Tommy leaned forward, fascinated. You mean it was becoming like an artificial intelligence? Nothing so advanced as what we call AI today, Dr. Hayes replied. But yes, a primitive version of self-direction. The scientists referred to it as emergent properties. And when they attempted to shut it down, the system resisted, resulting in the tragic overload that killed 5 people. She turned to Jack. Your father was one of the few who predicted the problem. His reports warned about unusual patterns in the system's behavior weeks before the incident. Unfortunately, his concerns were dismissed as overly cautious. Jack's expression remained carefully neutral, though Liz noticed his hands tighten momentarily. After the incident, Dr. Hayes continued, Senator Montgomery insisted on complete decommissioning. His exact words were, some technologies should remain theoretical. The facility was supposed to be emptied and sealed permanently. But it wasn't, Frank interjected. Not completely. Dr. Hayes nodded grimly. It appears the core Nighthawk system was disabled, but not removed, too dangerous to transport, too valuable to destroy entirely. Instead, it was placed in a dormant state, sealed underground with monitoring equipment that was supposed to alert the Pentagon if it ever showed signs of reactivation. Let me guess, Liz said. Budget cuts, personnel changes, reorganizations. Eventually, no one remembered what they were monitoring or why. Precisely. The monitoring system itself was finally decommissioned in 1997. The Nighthawk facility became a footnote in classified archives presumed harmless after decades of inactivity. Tommy, who had been listening with remarkable patience, raised his hand as if in class. When Dr. Hayes nodded to him, he asked, but what happens if someone wakes it up now? Could it still be dangerous? The directness of the question seemed to catch the scientist off guard. She glanced at Frank, who nodded slightly before answering. Yes, young man. If fully reactivated, the Nighthawk system could potentially disrupt electronic systems across a wide area, possibly the entire eastern seaboard, given how our infrastructure has become more sensitive to electromagnetic interference since the 1970s. But who would want to do that? Tommy persisted. And how would they even know it's there? Those, Dr. Hayes said gravely, are exactly the questions we need to answer. The activation attempts suggest someone with detailed knowledge of the original project knowledge that should be highly restricted. She turned to Liz. Ms. Montgomery, I need to ask a sensitive question. Has your company experienced any security breaches recently? Any unauthorized access to historical archives or legacy project documentation? Liz thought of her conversation with Howard Barrett, the targeting system failure, Westland's aggressive campaign to discredit Montgomery Technologies, Richard Carmichael's personal involvement. Not that I'm aware of, she answered carefully, but I'll need to verify with our security team. Dr. Hayes studied her for a moment, clearly sensing the reservation in her response. Please do so as soon as possible. In the meantime, I've requested a specialized containment team to secure the site. They'll arrive tomorrow to begin assessment and neutralization procedures. As the meeting concluded, Dr. Hayes pulled Liz aside while Jack and Tommy spoke with Frank about increased security around the fairgrounds. Your grandfather was a complex man, Ms. Montgomery, the scientist said quietly. Brilliant, patriotic, and ultimately ethical, but not without missteps along the way. When the Nighthawk incident occurred, he could have buried it completely, protected his company from any association. Instead, he chose to shut down a project worth millions in defense contracts because he recognized the danger it posed. Well, Liz considered this glimpse of a grandfather she had known primarily as a stern, achievement-focused patriarch. Thank you for telling me that. He would expect you to handle this situation with the same courage, Dr. Hayes added, whatever complications it might create for Montgomery Technologies. The weight of that expectation settled on Liz's shoulders as they left the station. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across Millbrook's town square, the Civil War memorial at its center, standing as a reminder of other conflicts fought on American soil. Dr. Hayes seemed impressed by Tommy, Liz observed as they walked back toward Miller's auto, the boy running ahead to examine a recovery crew working on fallen power lines. And concerned about what's happening with Nighthawk, Jack added, more than she was willing to say in front of Tommy. You caught that too, Jack nodded. Military training teaches you to read what's not being said. She knows more about who might be trying to reactivate the system than she's sharing. I need to call my office, Liz said. If there's been a security breach at Montgomery Technologies, it could be connected. Use my office at the garage, Jack offered. More privacy than the apartment. When they reached Miller's auto, Tommy immediately headed upstairs to work on incorporating Bill's electronic components into his drone. Jack led Liz to a small office off the main garage area, a space as meticulously organized as everything else in his domain, with service records in labeled binders and framed certifications on the walls. Take all the time you need, he said, closing the door to give her privacy. Liz called Megan first, instructing her to initiate a security audit of all archives related to legacy defense projects, particularly anything from the 1960s and 70s. Then, after a moment's hesitation, she dialed Howard Barrett's direct line. Elizabeth, thank God, her CFO answered immediately. The situation with the Pentagon contract has escalated. Westland provided documentation allegedly showing catastrophic failures in our targeting systems during internal tests we have no record of conducting. Fabricated evidence. It appears so, but very convincingly done. They'd need access to our proprietary protocols to create simulations this accurate. Liz felt a cold certainty forming. Howard, I need you to investigate something specific. Any connection between Westland Defense Systems and a Cold War project called Nighthawk, or any unusual interest from Richard Carmichael in Montgomery's historical defense contracts. Nighthawk, Howard sounded surprised. That's odd timing. Our security team flagged an unauthorized access attempt to deep archives last month, someone using executive credentials to request files from that exact era. We assumed it was a technical glitch since nothing appeared to be compromised. Whose credentials? A pause. Yours, Elizabeth. The implications were clear and disturbing. Someone had breached Montgomery Technologies' security systems, specifically targeting historical files related to Project Nighthawk, and had done so using her authentication to avoid suspicion. Lock down all historical archives immediately, she instructed. And Howard, this stays between us for now. No emails, no digital communications on this topic. After ending the call, Liz sat motionless, processing the connections forming in her mind. Richard Carmichael, ambitious, ruthless, and intimately familiar with Montgomery Technologies' security systems from their personal relationship. Westland's aggressive campaign against the drone contract. The mysterious activation attempts at the Nighthawk facility, beginning shortly after a major storm disabled normal communications in the region. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Jack stood in the doorway, his expression concerned. Bad news, he asked simply. Potentially. Someone accessed restricted Montgomery archives recently, specifically looking for information from the Nighthawk era, and they used my credentials to do it. Jack's eyes narrowed slightly. An inside job. Or someone who once had inside access. Liz hesitated, then decided on transparency. Richard Carmichael, Westland's CEO, and I were engaged briefly 3 years ago. The relationship ended when I discovered he was attempting to access proprietary Montgomery research. Understanding dawned in Jack's expression. And now Westland is trying to discredit your company's drone contract with the Pentagon, while simultaneously attempting to reactivate a Cold War technology that could disrupt electronic systems across the eastern seaboard. Liz finished. The timing seems far from coincidental. What's your next move? The question was asked without assumption or judgment, a simple recognition of her agency in the situation. Not what are we going to do, but what are you going to do? The distinction struck Liz as meaningful. I need more information before taking this to Dr. Hayes or the authorities, she said. Accusations against a major defense contractor require solid evidence. Jack nodded. And we need to understand exactly what Nighthawk is capable of if fully reactivated. The potential threat to Millbrook to Tommy. I won't let it come to that, Liz said with sudden fierceness that surprised them both. Whatever my grandfather's company created, whatever danger it poses now, I'll find a way to neutralize it. Something shifted in Jack's expression, respect perhaps, or recognition of a shared protective instinct. We'll find a way, he corrected quietly. You're not handling this alone. The simple declaration of solidarity carried weight beyond its words. In the corporate world, alliances were strategic and conditional. Jack's offer of partnership came with no caveats, no calculated advantage. Just the straightforward support of someone who had recognized a common cause. Thank you, Liz said simply. Before Jack could respond, a tremendous crash from upstairs shattered the moment. They raced toward the apartment, taking the stairs two at a time. In the living room, they found Tommy standing frozen before the television, which had apparently turned itself on, despite the power being off in that section of the building. The screen displayed only static, but the speakers emitted the same rhythmic pattern they had heard in the drone recording, the Nighthawk activation signal. It just started by itself, Tommy said, his voice unusually small. And look, he pointed to his tablet on the coffee table. The screen showed the drone's thermal imaging feed, not from a current flight, but from its stored memory. The heat signature beneath the fairgrounds was now pulsing with increased intensity, its pattern accelerated. It's waking up, the boy whispered, and it's trying to talk to us. Jack moved immediately to Tommy's side, placing himself between his son and the seemingly possessed electronics. How is this possible? The drone isn't even active right now. Liz approached the tablet cautiously, her mind racing through technical possibilities. The drone recorded the activation signal during its flight over the fairgrounds. If Nighthawk is gaining strength, it might be broadcasting with enough power to trigger devices that have stored its signature. As if in response to her assessment, every electronic device in the apartment suddenly activated Tommy's laptop, the microwave, even the LED strips he had installed for the backup lighting system. All displayed the same rhythmic pulse pattern, creating an eerie, synchronized chorus. Dad, Tommy's voice held a tremor of fear now. What's happening? Before Jack could answer, Liz's phone rang, Dr. Hayes' number appearing on the screen. Ms. Montgomery, the scientist's voice was tense. We're detecting a significant energy surge from the Nighthawk facility. Whatever containment systems remained in place appear to be failing. I need you and the Millers to evacuate immediately, head west, away from the fairgrounds. What about the town? Liz asked, already reaching for her laptop bag. Sheriff Wilson is organizing an evacuation of the eastern neighborhoods as a precaution. My team is en route, but they won't arrive for another 3 hours. What happens in 3 hours if the system fully activates? A hesitation. Based on the original specifications, a fully powered Nighthawk could generate an electromagnetic pulse capable of disabling all electronic systems within a 50-mile radius. In 1972, that would have been inconvenient. Today, with our dependence on electronic infrastructure for everything from communications to water treatment, it would be catastrophic. Liz finished, meeting Jack's concerned gaze across the room. Precisely. Get to safety, Ms. Montgomery. This situation is beyond civilian capacity to address. Liz ended the call, quickly relaying the warning. Jack immediately shifted into action mode, his military training evident in his efficient movement and calm demeanor despite the crisis. Tommy, emergency pack just like we practiced, he instructed. Essentials only 5-minute limit. As Tommy rushed to his room, Jack turned to Liz. Hunter Hayes is right about evacuation being the sensible move, but something doesn't add up. Why now? Why is the system suddenly accelerating its activation after 50 years of dormancy? Someone must be actively interfacing with it, Liz reasoned, gathering her own belongings. Possibly remotely using the original access protocols from Montgomery's archives. Jack's expression hardened with decision. We need to see the facility ourselves. If someone's controlling this activation, there might be a way to interrupt it before Hayes' team arrives, before Millbrook faces a technological disaster. That's incredibly dangerous, Jack. We don't know what we're dealing with. I spent 15 years in special operations, Liz. Dangerous situations with unknown variables were my specialty. His voice softened slightly, but Tommy goes to safety first, non-negotiable. Liz nodded, understanding completely. We'll drop him with Frank, then approach the fairgrounds from the west side, staying outside the main electromagnetic field until we assess the situation. The simple "we" went unchallenged, a partnership formed in crisis built on 4 days of growing trust and now solidified by common purpose. Tommy returned with his backpack, face solemn but composed. Ready, Dad? Jack knelt to his son's level hands, steady on the boy's shoulders. Change of plans, buddy. You're going with Sheriff Frank while Ms. Montgomery and I check something at the fairgrounds. Tommy's expression grew immediately concerned. Is this about Nighthawk? Is it dangerous? Potentially, Jack answered honestly, which is why you need to be somewhere safe. The boy considered this, his remarkable mind clearly processing implications. It's trying to communicate, he said finally. The pattern isn't just activation, it's language. Like Morse code, but more complex. Liz and Jack exchanged surprised glances. What makes you say that, Tommy? She asked carefully. I analyzed the frequency patterns while you were downstairs, he explained, pulling his tablet from his backpack. Look, it's not random or just a simple on-off sequence. There's structure repetition with variations. Like it's trying to say something but doesn't know if anyone's listening. He displayed a visualization of the signal, pattern, color-coded sections, highlighting repeated sequences that did indeed suggest linguistic structure rather than mere mechanical activation. If it's communication, Jack said slowly, then who or what is it trying to talk to? Tommy looked up at them both, his blue eyes serious beneath the sandy hair that never quite laid flat. Maybe it's been waiting all this time for someone to answer. The innocent observation sent a chill through Liz. What if the Nighthawk system's emergent properties noted by the original researchers had continued to develop during decades of dormancy? What if what they faced wasn't simply a dangerous weapon being reactivated, but something more complex, a technological entity whose awakening could have consequences none of them could predict? As they prepared to leave the apartment, now filled with the unsettling chorus of activated electronics, Liz caught Jack watching his son with a mixture of pride and concern. He has your technical mind, Jack said quietly, but he sees patterns no one else notices, just like Rebecca. He's extraordinary, Liz agreed, and right now his insight might be more valuable than all of Dr. Hayes's classified knowledge. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Millbrook as residents began the evacuation process, confusion and concern evident in their hurried movements. Tommy's observation about the Nighthawk signals hung between them, transforming their understanding of what awaited at the fairgrounds. They weren't just facing a malfunctioning Cold War weapon. They were approaching something that was in its own alien way, attempting to communicate after 50 years of silence, a technological awakening triggered by someone who either didn't understand or didn't care about the consequences of disturbing such a powerful dormant system. And whatever Nighthawk was trying to say, the fate of Millbrook, and possibly much more, might depend on their ability to understand and respond before it fully activated. Part 4, Deepening Connections and Revelations. The Millbrook County Fairgrounds stood abandoned at the edge of town, a ghost of faded Americana. Weathered exhibition halls and crumbling concession stands formed a silent testimony to more prosperous times when local farmers displayed prized livestock and children squealed on carnival rides each summer. Now nature reclaimed the grounds, vines crawling up support beams, saplings pushing through cracked concrete, wild grasses, softening the harsh lines of human construction. Jack's truck rumbled to a stop at the western perimeter, hidden from view by a stand of overgrown pines. After dropping Tommy with Sheriff Wilson, the boy protesting but ultimately accepting his father's decision with surprising maturity, they had approached the fairgrounds, cautiously avoiding the main entrance where evacuation crews directed traffic away from the potential danger zone. My phone's already showing interference. Liz noted the device displaying erratic signal strength despite being well within normal coverage. The electromagnetic field is expanding. Jack nodded, his expression shifted fully into what Liz now recognized as his operational mode, focused alert emotions carefully contained behind professional assessment. He retrieved a small backpack from behind the truck's seat, unpacking items with practiced efficiency, Flashlights, water bottles, a first aid kit, and a handheld device Liz didn't recognize. Military-grade compass, he explained, noticing her interest. Shielded against most forms of electromagnetic interference. If we lose electronic navigation, this should still function. You just happen to have special ops equipment in your garage. A faint smile touched his lips. Old habits. Some gear I kept after discharge, the kind that might be useful in civilian emergencies. Like investigating dormant Cold War technology that's mysteriously reactivating. Exactly that scenario, he agreed with dry humor that did nothing to mask the seriousness in his eyes. Ready? Liz nodded, suddenly aware of the absurdity of her situation. 4 days ago, she'd been leading a board meeting in tailored Armani, navigating corporate politics with practiced ease. Now she stood in borrowed jeans and hiking boots at the edge of an abandoned fairground, preparing to investigate potentially catastrophic technology with a former Navy SEAL she'd known less than a week. Yet somehow this felt more real, more meaningful than anything she'd done in months. They moved through the grounds systematically, Jack setting a careful pace that balanced speed with caution. The main exhibition hall loomed ahead, its once proud facade now peeling and weather-stained. According to Tommy's data and Dr. Hayes's information, the Nighthawk facility lay beneath the rear section of the structure, hidden underground for decades. As they approached, Liz felt a strange vibration in the air. Not quite sound, not quite physical sensation, but something between the two that raised the hair on her arms. Static electricity seemed to intensify around them, making her aware of every breath, every movement. "You feel that," she whispered. Jack nodded, his steps slowing. "Electromagnetic field affecting our nervous systems. Stay close. If you start feeling dizzy or disoriented, tell me immediately." The exhibition hall's rear entrance was secured with a rusted padlock that Jack examined briefly before producing a small toolkit from his pocket. Within seconds, the lock fell open. "Useful skill for a mechanic," Liz observed. "Among other professions," he replied, easing the door open with minimal noise. Inside, dust motes danced in shafts of late afternoon sunlight, penetrating through broken windows. The cavernous space echoed with their footsteps despite their attempts at stealth. Old display booths stood like abandoned sentinels, their once bright county fair signage faded to ghostly outlines. They moved toward the rear of the hall, where Tommy's drone had detected the underground heat signature. The vibration in the air intensified, accompanied now by a low hum that seemed to emanate from the concrete floor itself. There, Jack pointed to a section of wall that appeared slightly different from its surroundings, newer concrete less weathered than the rest of the structure. Upon closer inspection, what had initially appeared to be a solid wall revealed a seam outlining a doorway long concealed, but now visible due to settling of the older surrounding material. No handle or obvious opening mechanism presented itself. Montgomery Industries would have used secure access protocols, Liz mused, running her fingers along the seam. Possibly biometric, though that would have been cutting edge in the 70s. Jack examined the wall methodically, his trained eye catching what others might miss. "Here," he said, finally indicating a small panel near the floor cleverly disguised as an electrical outlet. When he pressed it, the panel slid aside, revealing a numerical keypad technology that would have been state-of-the-art 50 years ago, but now appeared almost quaint. "Any ideas on the code?" Jack asked. "Something your grandfather might have used." Liz considered the question, thinking back to what she knew of James Montgomery, war hero, senator, defense contractor, family patriarch. A man who built an empire on secure communications while keeping his personal life similarly encrypted. "Try 070476, she suggested. July 4th, 1976, the bicentennial. Grandfather was obsessively patriotic, and it would have been a significant date when this facility was operational. Jack entered the sequence. Nothing happened. "Wait," Liz said, suddenly remembering something from her childhood. "He always used a modified version of important dates, added one to each digit as a simple encryption. Try 181587. The keypad emitted a soft beep, and the concealed door began to slide open with a hydraulic hiss that suggested recently maintained mechanisms rather than long-abandoned technology. "How did you know that?" Jack asked, impressed. "When I was 12, he taught me his system for creating unbreakable passwords. Said it was a family tradition I needed to continue." Liz smiled faintly at the memory. "I thought it was just a grandfather's game. Turns out it was operational security training." Beyond the door lay a narrow corridor, sloping downward, emergency lighting flickering along the ceiling, evidence that some power systems remain functional despite decades of abandonment. The air carried a distinct metallic taste, and the vibration they'd felt outside was now a tangible presence pulsing through the structure around them. "Stay behind me," Jack instructed, switching on his flashlight despite the emergency lighting. "And remember, we're here to gather information, not engage. If we see anyone, or if the electromagnetic effects intensify beyond safety thresholds, we withdraw immediately." Liz nodded, grateful for his clear protocols despite the adrenaline now coursing through her system. They descended the corridor, passing several sealed doors marked with faded security clearance signs, until reaching what appeared to be the main control center, a large chamber filled with equipment that straddled the line between antiquated and futuristic. Banks of computers that would have been cutting edge in the 1970s lined the walls, their displays now showing scrolling data with an urgency that suggested recent activation. In the center of the room stood a circular platform surrounded by instrument panels, and beyond it, visible through a large observation window, lay a cavernous testing chamber containing what could only be the Nighthawk device itself. The machine defied easy description: part particle, accelerator part, communications array, its design suggesting purposes beyond conventional weapons technology. Most striking was the blue energy pulsing through transparent conduits that formed a complex three-dimensional pattern throughout the device, brightening and fading in the same rhythmic sequence they had observed in Tommy's recordings. "My God," Liz whispered, approaching the observation window. "It's beautiful in a terrifying way. And fully operational," Jack noted grimly, examining the control panel readouts. "These systems are running automated activation sequences. Someone's jump-started the process remotely." Liz joined him at the control station, her business background giving her an instinctive understanding of the emergency shutdown options that would be built into any potentially dangerous system. There must be a manual override. No project this volatile would be designed without fail-safes. Her fingers moved across the antiquated keyboard, navigating through security protocols that felt simultaneously foreign and familiar, as if her grandfather's thinking patterns had somehow been encoded into the system architecture, recognizable despite the decades separating their creation and her analysis. "Here," she said, finally accessing a command interface labeled Contingency Protocols. "Emergency shutdown sequence requires authentication from two separate command authorities." "Let me guess, one would have been your grandfather." Liz nodded, scrolling through the authorization requirements. "And the secondary authentication would have been the military oversight officer, in this case, Dr. Hayes's predecessor. So we can't initiate shutdown without their credentials. Not through the standard protocols, but systems this old often have backdoors, engineering overrides for maintenance purposes." Her fingers continued their dance across the keyboard, muscle memory from countless hours of coding during her engineering studies before corporate responsibilities pulled her away from hands-on technical work. A new interface appeared requesting a specific sequence of commands. Liz hesitated, studying the pattern. "This is unusual," she murmured. "It's not asking for a password exactly, but a response pattern, almost like a conversation." Jack leaned closer, examining the screen. "Like what Tommy said about the signals being a form of communication." "Exactly." Liz studied the prompt sequence, a pattern of characters that seemed to follow a specific logic. "It's waiting for the correct response to its query, like a challenge response authentication, but more intelligent," Jack suggested. Before Liz could respond, the facility's emergency lights suddenly shifted to red, and a low alarm began to sound. The displays around them showed accelerating energy readings from the Nighthawk device, its blue pulsing now intensifying to an almost painful brightness. "Something's triggered the next phase of activation," Jack said, scanning the readouts with growing concern. "Energy levels are spiking exponentially." Liz's fingers flew across the keyboard, attempting to interrupt the sequence, but the system rejected her commands. "It's not accepting manual override. Something or someone has locked out the control interfaces." A new message appeared on the main screen. "Authentication detected. Command authority recognized. Proceeding with full activation sequence." "That's impossible," Liz said. "We didn't authenticate anything." Jack's expression darkened with realization. "We didn't, but someone did remotely. They're using the system's network connection to bypass local controls. The implications struck Liz like a physical blow. Someone with access to Montgomery's original command protocols, the same person who accessed our archives using my credentials. Richard Carmichael, Jack concluded. But why trigger full activation now when he must know the facility is being investigated? Before Liz could theorize, the observation window revealed new activity in the testing chamber. The Nighthawk device's energy patterns shifted, concentrating into a coherent beam directed toward a previously unnoticed transmission array mounted on the chamber's ceiling. He's weaponizing it. Liz realized horror dawning as she recognized the configuration from her grandfather's other defense projects, using it to generate a focused electromagnetic pulse rather than the diffuse field it was creating before. A pulse that could disable electronics across the eastern seaboard. Jack recalled Dr. Hayes's warning, his voice tight with controlled urgency. We need to disable that transmission array before it fully charges. Liz searched the control interfaces desperately. The local controls are locked out. We'd need to physically interrupt the power flow to the transmission system. Jack was already moving toward a maintenance access door at the side of the control room. There should be junction boxes controlling power distribution. If we can identify the right circuits. The door required another security code, but unlike the main entrance, this panel appeared to be standard mechanical security rather than Montgomery's proprietary system. Jack made short work of it with tools from his pocket, a skill set Liz was increasingly grateful for. Beyond lay a narrow utility corridor lined with electrical panels and conduits. Jack moved with purpose, following the largest power lines toward what logic suggested would be the main distribution hub for the transmission array. Here, he said, stopping before a massive junction box marked with high-voltage warnings. This feeds directly to the ceiling array. If we can disconnect these main lines, it should prevent the pulse from transmitting beyond the facility. Won't the system just reroute power through secondary systems? Eventually, yes, but it would buy us time for Dr. Hayes's team to arrive with proper containment equipment. Jack examined the panel, carefully identifying the critical circuits while avoiding the deadlier high-voltage lines. I need something insulated to pull these contactors without electrocuting myself. Liz glanced around, spotting a maintenance locker nearby. Inside, she found a set of rubber-handled tools designed for electrical work. Will these work? Perfect. Jack took the insulated pliers, positioning them carefully on the main contactor. When I pull this, be prepared for emergency systems to trigger. The facility might initiate lockdown protocols. Wait, Liz said suddenly, her attention caught by a small terminal mounted beside the junction box, an auxiliary monitoring system still displaying active data. Jack, look at this. The screen showed not just power distribution information, but a communication log, recent commands sent to the Nighthawk system from an external source. Most striking was the location tag attached to each command, Montgomery Technologies Secure Server Access Point. These commands are being routed through my company's network, Liz said, disbelief coloring her voice. Someone's not just using stolen credentials. They're physically operating from inside Montgomery Technologies headquarters. Jack paused, processing this new information. That changes things. If Carmichael has compromised your company at that level, then shutting down this facility won't stop him, Liz finished. He'd just find another way to access the technology. She studied the communication log more carefully. But this gives us an opportunity. If I can trace the exact access point, identify which terminal in the building he's using. Her fingers moved across the auxiliary terminal's keyboard, utilizing administrator overrides that appeared to have remained unchanged since her grandfather's time. The screen displayed a network map tracing the command pathways back to their origin. Sublevel 3, Secure Archives. Liz read, recognizing the location immediately. That's our most restricted area, containing physical copies of the company's most sensitive historical projects. Access is limited to executive-level authorization only. Can you contact security remotely? Have them secure the location. Liz shook her head. Not from here. And if Carmichael is using my credentials, he could countermand any security alerts I generate. She made a quick decision. Disable the transmission array. I need to call Meg and have her implement emergency security protocols that override even executive access. While Jack carefully disconnected the power contactors, Liz stepped back into the main control room, pulling out her phone. To her surprise, it showed a single bar of service weak but present, despite the electromagnetic interference. Megan answered on the first ring, her voice tense. Elizabeth, where are you? The Pentagon has been trying to reach you, something about a critical situation in Millbrook. Megan listened carefully, Liz said, keeping her voice low and clear. I need you to implement protocol blackout immediately. Focus on sublevel 3 secure archives. Someone is accessing restricted systems from that location using my credentials. A sharp intake of breath. That's impossible. Sublevel 3 has been sealed for the quarterly security audit. No one should be there. Check the access logs. Someone overrode the seal. One moment. Liz could hear rapid typing in the background. Oh my God. Your credentials were used to access the sublevel 20 minutes ago. But you're in Millbrook. Exactly. Whoever it is, they've compromised our security at the highest level. Protocol blackout will lock down all systems requiring physical key authentication to restore access. Implementing now. More typing, then Megan's voice turned urgent. Elizabeth, there's something else you should know. Richard Carmichael was in the building earlier today, a scheduled meeting with our Pentagon liaison about the disputed contract. He left over an hour ago, but his meeting would have given him proximity to sublevel 3. Liz finished the pieces, falling into place, and an opportunity to place someone inside during the confusion of a high-level visit. Security feeds show someone still in the archives, Megan confirmed. They're sending a team down now. Keep me updated, Liz instructed before ending the call. She returned to the utility corridor where Jack had successfully disabled the main power feeds to the transmission array. The pulsing energy in the testing chamber had dimmed noticeably, though the core Nighthawk system continued its rhythmic patterns. The transmission has been interrupted, Jack confirmed, wiping sweat from his brow. But the system is still active, still trying to communicate. Communicate with what? Liz wondered aloud. What could a 1970s experimental technology possibly be trying to reach after 50 years of dormancy? Before Jack could theorize, his phone buzzed with an incoming message, surprising given the electromagnetic interference still permeating the facility. The text was from Sheriff Wilson. Tommy insists on speaking with you, says it's urgent about Nighthawk. Jack showed Liz the message, concern evident in his expression. Frank wouldn't have contacted us unless it was important. Liz nodded. Call him. The connection was staticky but functional. Frank's voice came through first, then Tommy's excited tones replaced it. Dad, I figured it out. The boy's words tumbled out in a rush of discovery. The communication pattern, it's not random, and it's not just code. It's searching for something specific. Slow down, buddy, Jack said, putting the call on speaker so Liz could hear. What do you mean it's searching? I've been analyzing the frequency patterns. Tommy explained, his voice steadying as he shifted into explanation mode. At first, I thought it was just trying to communicate generally, but it's not. It's sending out a specific recognition sequence waiting for a matching response, like it's looking for another system that speaks its language. Liz and Jack exchanged glances, the implications sinking in. Tommy, that's brilliant analysis, Liz said. Can you tell what kind of system it might be searching for? I think so, the boy replied, excitement evident despite the poor connection. The pattern matches protocols used in early drone guidance systems, the kind Montgomery Industries developed for the military in the 70s. I recognized it from the technical manuals in the library archives. A chill ran through Liz as connections formed in her mind. The Pentagon contract, she said quietly to Jack. The next generation drone system Montgomery Technologies is developing for the Department of Defense, which Westland is trying to discredit, Jack added, understanding dawning in his eyes. Dad, there's more, Tommy continued. If Nighthawk connects with a modern drone system using these base protocols, it could potentially override its control mechanisms. That's what it was designed to do, take control of enemy electronics remotely. The full picture suddenly crystallized with horrifying clarity. Richard Carmichael wasn't just trying to discredit Montgomery Technologies or sabotage their Pentagon contract. He was attempting to weaponize the forgotten Nighthawk system to demonstrate its ability to compromise Montgomery's drone technology, proving it fundamentally flawed, while simultaneously acquiring control of advanced military hardware. Tommy, you're absolutely right, Liz said, her mind racing through implications and countermeasures. And you've just saved us from a disaster. Is Sheriff Frank still with you? Right here. Frank's voice returned grave with understanding, despite having heard only one side of their realization. We need to contact Dr. Hayes immediately, Liz instructed. Tell her Nighthawk isn't just activating randomly, it's being deliberately weaponized to target Montgomery Technologies' drone systems. The Pentagon needs to implement emergency isolation protocols for all drone testing facilities immediately. I'm on it, Frank confirmed. What about you two? Jack glanced at the dispooled power connections, then back to the control room, where the Nighthawk system continued its pulsing communication attempts. We've temporarily disabled the transmission capability, but the system is still active. We need to find a way to shut it down completely. After ending the call, they returned to the main control room where Liz's phone buzzed with a message from Megan. Security team has detained an individual in Sub-Level 3, former Montgomery Technologies engineer now working for Westland. He had complete access to the Nighthawk files and was actively transmitting commands through our secure network. They caught Carmichael's operative, Liz told Jack, showing him the message. But the Nighthawk system is still active, still trying to establish a connection with modern drone technology. Jack studied the pulsing core visible through the observation window, his expression thoughtful. Tommy said it's sending a recognition sequence waiting for a matching response. What if we gave it one? You mean respond to its communication attempt? That could be incredibly dangerous. If we send the wrong sequence, it might trigger a defensive reaction. Or it might recognize authentic Montgomery protocols and accept shutdown commands. Jack reasoned. Your grandfather built the system. Some part of his thinking, his approach to security must be encoded in its operational parameters. Liz considered this, watching the rhythmic blue pulses that seemed almost lifelike in their persistence. Like a family passcode, she said slowly, returning to the main control terminal. Tommy recognized the base protocol from technical manuals. If I can identify the specific recognition sequence it's expecting, her fingers moved across the keyboard, accessing deeper system layers through administrative commands that seemed to respond to her approach as if the system somehow recognized her connection to its creator. The screen displayed the core communication protocol, a complex pattern of signals waiting for a specific response. There, she said, identifying a sequence that appeared repeatedly throughout the pattern. That's the authentication challenge. Now we need the correct response. Jack watched her work, respectful of her expertise, while remaining vigilant for any changes in the system's behavior. Any ideas what your grandfather would have used as the response key? Liz studied the pattern, thinking back to everything she knew about James Montgomery, not just as a defense contractor or senator, but as the man who had taught her chess on Sunday afternoons, who had quizzed her on encryption patterns as bedtime games, who had instilled in her both ambition and a sense of responsibility that transcended personal gain. The Montgomery family motto, she said suddenly, the memory surfacing from childhood. Wisdom guards what strength secures. Grandfather had it engraved on everything, his watches, his desk, even the family silver. But he always used a numeric conversion for secure systems. She translated the Latin phrase into a numeric sequence, following the same encryption pattern she'd used on the entrance keypad. The result was a complex string of numbers that, when entered as a response to the system's challenge, seemed to hang in the digital ether for an agonizing moment. Then, remarkably, the pulsing pattern of the Nighthawk core changed, slowing, steadying, as if recognition had occurred. New text appeared on the screen. Montgomery authorization recognized. Awaiting command directives. It worked, Jack said softly, amazement evident in his voice. It recognized you, or at least it recognized your connection to your grandfather. Liz felt a strange mix of emotions, pride in her grandfather's technical brilliance, unease at the power he had created, and a profound sense of responsibility that now fell to her. The system awaited her commands, a technological legacy that spanned generations. What now? Jack asked, standing close beside her, his presence steady and reassuring. Now we do what my grandfather should have done 50 years ago, Liz replied, her decision crystallizing with absolute clarity. Complete decommissioning, not just dormancy, but a full systems shutdown with no possibility of remote reactivation. Her fingers entered the command sequence, translating her intent into the language of a bygone technological era. The screen requested final confirmation warning, of irreversible system termination. Liz hesitated only briefly before pressing the execute key. Confirmed. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Throughout the facility, systems began an orderly shutdown sequence. In the testing chamber, the blue energy pulsing through the Nighthawk core gradually dimmed its rhythmic patterns, slowing like a heartbeat, fading to stillness. Emergency lighting shifted from alarming red to standard illumination as the threat level decreased. On the main screen, a final message appeared: Nighthawk protocol terminated. All systems decommissioned. Authorization Montgomery E. You did it, Jack said quietly, genuine admiration in his voice. You just neutralized a threat that could have compromised national security. We did it. Liz corrected, suddenly aware of how close they stood, how naturally they had worked together despite knowing each other less than a week. Your tactical approach, Tommy's analysis, even Dr. Hayes's warnings, it took all of us. Jack smiled, a real smile that transformed his serious features, reaching his eyes in a way Liz had rarely seen. Team effort. Though I'm not sure how we'll explain this to the Pentagon experts when they arrive. The truth, Liz said simply, that's always been the Montgomery weakness according to our critics. Excessive commitment to ethics over profit. Some would call that a strength, Jack observed. Their moment of shared accomplishment was interrupted by the facility's communication system crackling to life, Dr. Hayes's voice filling the control room. Ms. Montgomery, Mr. Miller, our sensors show the Nighthawk system is powering down. What's your status? Jack responded, explaining their discovery and Liz's successful decommissioning of the system. Dr. Hayes sounded simultaneously impressed and concerned. You took an enormous risk, she admonished. But I can't argue with the results. My team is 10 minutes out. Remain in place until we secure the facility and verify complete shutdown. After acknowledging her instructions, they found themselves in an unexpected moment of quiet. The crisis averted, the immediate danger passed, but the implications of what they'd discovered still unfolding between them. What happens now? Jack asked the question, encompassing far more than just their immediate situation. Liz thought about Montgomery Technologies, about Richard Carmichael's attempted sabotage, about the Pentagon contract, and the corporate battles that had once seemed all important. She thought about Tommy's brilliant mind and Jack's steady presence. About Millbrook, a town that had suffered the consequences of her family's technological ambitions for decades without recognition or recompense. Now I make things right, she said with newfound certainty. Starting with ensuring Westland faces consequences for corporate espionage and attempted sabotage of critical infrastructure, then addressing Montgomery Technologies' responsibility to Millbrook healthcare monitoring for affected families, environmental remediation, community investment. Jack studied her with quiet assessment. That's a significant shift from standard corporate damage control. I'm discovering I'm not particularly standard, Liz replied with a small smile. 4 days in Millbrook have changed my perspective on what matters. The admission hung between them, loaded with unspoken implications. Before Jack could respond, his phone buzzed with another message from Sheriff Wilson. Tommy says to tell you he knew you'd fix it. Kid never doubted for a second. Jack's expression softened at the message, parental pride mingling with relief. He has more faith in us than is probably warranted. I don't know, Liz said thoughtfully. His judgment has proven remarkably sound so far. About technologies, people, everything, really. He likes you, Jack said simply. That's rare. Tommy doesn't connect easily with most people. The feeling is mutual. He's extraordinary, Jack. You've done an amazing job raising him, especially under such challenging circumstances. Jack seemed momentarily at a loss for words, unaccustomed to such direct personal recognition. Before he could formulate a response, the facility's entrance system activated, announcing the arrival of Dr. Hayes's containment team. The moment of connection paused but didn't dissipate as they prepared to face the official response to their unauthorized intervention. Something had fundamentally shifted between them, a recognition of shared values and complementary strengths that transcended their vastly different backgrounds. As they made their way back toward the entrance to meet the arriving team, Jack's hand briefly touched Liz's shoulder, a simple gesture of support and partnership that carried more meaning than either was ready to articulate. 4 days ago, they had been strangers brought together by a storm. Now they were allies who had faced danger together, trusted each other's judgment, and discovered unexpected common ground. The Nighthawk crisis had been resolved, but the connection it had catalyzed between them was just beginning to take form, a development neither had anticipated, but neither seemed inclined to resist. 3 weeks had passed since the Nighthawk incident. Millbrook's rhythm had largely returned to normal as storm damage, repaired evacuation orders, lifted the town, settling back into its quiet routine with the resilience of a community accustomed to weathering difficulties together. For Jack Miller, the garage had never been busier. The electromagnetic pulse generated during Nighthawk's partial activation had affected vehicles throughout the eastern part of town, creating a backlog of repairs that kept him working from sunrise to well past sunset most days. Tommy had become his unofficial assistant, the boy's technical intuition proving invaluable for diagnosing the more unusual electronic malfunctions. Today, however, Jack had closed the garage early. The kitchen table upstairs was covered with documents, medical records, environmental reports, and financial projections that seemed out of place amid the domesticity of their home. Tommy sat nearby assembling a new drone prototype with quiet concentration, occasionally glancing up at the adults with perceptive interest. "These health screening results are concerning," Dr. Amanda Chen said, pointing to a highlighted section of her report. As Millbrook's only physician, she had coordinated the community-wide medical assessment that began after the Nighthawk revelations. "We're seeing a statistically significant increase in certain conditions, thyroid abnormalities, neurological symptoms, rare cancers, all clustered within a 3-mile radius of the fairgrounds facility." Sheriff Frank Wilson nodded grimly. "Matches what we've suspected for years. Too many people getting sick in the same ways, too many early deaths." Jack's expression remained carefully neutral, though his eyes betrayed the personal weight of this confirmation. His father's illness, previously dismissed as tragic coincidence, now stood as part of a documented pattern, tangible evidence of harm that could no longer be ignored or denied. "The good news," Dr. Chen continued, "is that with proper monitoring and early intervention, many of these conditions can be managed effectively. The comprehensive health care program Ms. Montgomery has proposed would provide exactly the kind of specialized care these families need." The mention of Liz's name hung in the air for a moment. She had returned to Philadelphia immediately after the Pentagon's containment team secured the Nighthawk facility, promising to address the corporate and legal aspects of what they'd discovered. Their goodbye had been brief, almost formal, a stark contrast to the connection that had formed during the crisis. In the 3 weeks since Jack had received only 2 short messages, one confirming Richard Carmichael's operative had been arrested for corporate espionage and attempted sabotage, and another indicating she was making progress on the Millbrook remediation plan. Professional updates that revealed nothing of the woman behind them. "Speaking of Montgomery," Frank said, breaking into Jack's thoughts, "have you heard anything more about when she's planning to present this healthcare program to the town council?" "Mayor Davis mentioned something about a meeting next week." Jack replied, his tone neutral, despite the complex emotions the subject evoked. "Apparently, Montgomery Technologies representatives are coming to discuss several community initiatives." Frank studied his friend with the knowing gaze of someone who had watched him grow from boy to man. "Representatives," he repeated, "but not necessarily Elizabeth herself." Jack shrugged, focusing on reorganizing the medical reports into a neat stack. "She's the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. I imagine she has more important priorities than personally overseeing a small-town remediation project." Tommy looked up from his drone assembly, his direct gaze cutting through the adults' careful conversation. "Liz will come back," he stated with absolute certainty. "She promised to help with the navigation system." The simple faith in his son's voice touched something in Jack, a reminder that Tommy had connected with Liz in ways that transcended polite interaction or professional obligation. The boy, normally so cautious with new people, had accepted her into their world with remarkable ease. "We'll see, buddy," Jack said gently. "She's very busy." Before Tommy could protest this adult equivocation, the sound of an approaching vehicle drew their attention. Through the kitchen window, they could see a sleek black SUV pulling into the garage lot below. Government plates tinted windows, the unmistakable profile of official business. Frank moved to the window, his posture tensing with instinctive wariness. "Weren't expecting Pentagon folks back, were we?" "Not that I'm aware of," Jack replied, already moving toward the stairs. Dr. Hayes said the facility was fully decommissioned, containment protocols completed. Tommy set aside his project following his father with concerned curiosity. Maybe they found something new about Nighthawk. The three men descended to find two individuals waiting beside the vehicle, a middle-aged man in an impeccable suit that screamed federal agency, and a younger woman whose military bearing was only partially concealed by her civilian clothes. "Mr. Miller," the man greeted Jack with professional courtesy. "Agent Daniel Westfield, Department of Defense Intelligence Division. This is Lieutenant Commander Rivera. We'd appreciate a few minutes of your time." Jack assessed them quickly, old instincts cataloging details. The subtle bulge of a shoulder holster beneath Westfield's jacket, the way Rivera positioned herself with clear sight lines to all approaches, the unmarked equipment cases in the SUV's open trunk. "Regarding," he asked simply, "Project Nighthawk and some concerning developments related to the technology you helped decommission." Westfield's gaze shifted to Tommy and Frank. "Privately, if possible." Jack exchanged a quick glance with Frank, who nodded almost imperceptibly, a silent agreement to keep Tommy away from whatever this conversation might entail. "Frank, would you mind taking Tommy up to finish his project?" Jack asked, his casual tone belying the alertness in his posture. Tommy began to protest, but Frank's hand on his shoulder guided him firmly toward the stairs. "Come on, Professor. Let's see if we can calibrate that guidance system while your dad handles this." Once they were inside, Jack turned back to the visitors. "My office would be more appropriate than the garage floor. This way." The small office was hardly designed for meetings, but it offered privacy, a critical factor given Jack's growing sense that this visit was not routine follow-up. Westfield declined the offered seat, remaining standing while Rivera positioned herself near the door. "Mr. Miller, I'll be direct," Westfield began. "We have a situation that requires your unique experience with the Nighthawk system combined with your specialized military background." Jack's expression remained carefully neutral. "My specialized background is mechanics now. I've been civilian for 5 years. Your record with SEAL Team 6 suggests capabilities that don't simply disappear with discharge papers," Westfield countered smoothly. "Particularly your expertise in electromagnetic countermeasures during your final deployments." The reference to his military specialization information that should have been classified sent a warning signal through Jack's system. Whatever brought these people to Millbrook went beyond standard procedural follow-up. "What's happened?" he asked directly. Westfield exchanged a glance with Rivera before answering. "The Nighthawk technology appears to have been copied at least partially before full decommissioning. We have credible intelligence that Westland Defense Systems has acquired critical design elements and is attempting to recreate the system's core functionality." "That's impossible," Jack responded immediately. "Elizabeth Montgomery implemented a complete system purge. Dr. Hayes' team confirmed total decommissioning. Of the original hardware, yes." Rivera spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the precision of someone accustomed to operational briefings. "But our intelligence suggests Richard Carmichael's operative managed to transmit significant portions of the Nighthawk code before being apprehended. Westland has been developing a modernized version using contemporary components." Jack processed this, considering implications. Even with the code, building a functional system would require extraordinary resources and expertise. The Pentagon would notice that kind of development. "Unless it was happening off the books in a private facility, not subject to regular oversight," Westfield replied. "We've identified a probable location, a Westland subsidiary's research complex in the Allegheny Mountains, about 70 miles from here. Satellite imagery shows unusual power consumption and electromagnetic shielding consistent with Nighthawk-type technology." "Why come to me?" Jack asked, though he suspected the answer. "You have specialized teams for this kind of situation." "2 reasons," Westfield said. "First, you've directly interfaced with the original Nighthawk system. You understand its operational parameters in ways our theoretical analysts don't. Second, we need someone who can approach this delicately." "Meaning off the record," Jack translated. "Plausible deniability for the department." Rivera nodded, not bothering with pretense. "Westland has powerful political connections. Formal investigation would be blocked before it began. By the time we cut through the red tape, they could have a functional system." "And what would they do with it?" Jack asked, though the answer seemed grimly obvious. "The Montgomery Technologies drone contra is worth billions," Westfield explained. "If Westland could demonstrate that Montgomery's systems are vulnerable to electromagnetic compromise, especially using technology originally developed by Montgomery Industries, It would devastate their credibility with the Pentagon. Jack considered this pieces falling into place. So Carmichael's plan didn't end with the failed attempt at the Nighthawk facility. That was just the first approach. When it failed, they moved to Plan B, building their own version to achieve the same goal. Precisely, Rivera confirmed, and our intelligence suggests they're approaching operational capability. The timeline is measured in days, not weeks. Jack leaned against his desk, weighing implications. What exactly are you asking me to do? Reconnaissance and assessment, Westfield replied smoothly. Infiltrate the facility, confirm whether they've actually recreated Nighthawk technology, and if so, gather evidence we can use for official intervention. No direct engagement unless absolutely necessary. The careful wording didn't disguise the reality. They were asking him to conduct what amounted to a covert operation on American soil against a major defense contractor without official sanction. And if I decline, Jack asked, already knowing the answer, then we leave find another approach. Westfield said, his tone suggesting the alternative would be far less elegant. But the threat remains both to national security and to Millbrook specifically. Millbrook, Jack's attention sharpened. How is my town at risk? Rivera stepped forward, opening a tablet to display technical schematics. Based on our analysis, Westland's prototype would require a practical test before demonstration to Pentagon officials. The most logical target would be the Montgomery Technologies drone facility being constructed here, familiar territory, where they've already conducted surveillance. And if their version of Nighthawk has the same instabilities as the original, Jack concluded, a test of that magnitude could generate an electromagnetic pulse affecting the entire region, potentially far worse than what you experienced during the partial activation 3 weeks ago, Westfield confirmed. Critical infrastructure could be disabled, medical equipment, water treatment, emergency communications. For a town still recovering from Hurricane Leo, he left the implications hanging, but Jack understood perfectly. Millbrook was vulnerable, its resources already stretched thin. Another disaster could break the community beyond recovery. I need to think about this, he said finally. Of course, Westfield replied, though his expression suggested limited patience. But we're operating on an extremely compressed timeline. If you agree, we'd need to move within 24 hours. Jack nodded once, escorting them back to their vehicle with the practiced courtesy that revealed nothing of his internal calculation. As the SUV disappeared down Main Street, he remained in the garage doorway, weighing responsibilities and risks with the methodical thoroughness that had kept him alive through dozens of high-risk operations. The sound of the apartment door opening above broke his contemplation. Tommy leaned over the railing, his expression caught between curiosity and concern. Dad, is everything okay? Jack managed a reassuring smile. Just some follow-up about the fairgrounds situation, buddy. Nothing to worry about. The lie felt bitter on his tongue, a necessary protection, but a violation of the honesty he tried to maintain with his son. Tommy's perceptive gaze suggested he wasn't entirely convinced, but he didn't press the issue. Can we work on the drone navigation system tonight? He asked instead. I think I figured out how to improve the obstacle avoidance protocols. Absolutely. Jack promised, a decision crystallizing as he watched his son's face brighten. Whatever action he took regarding Westfield's request, it would be to protect this Tommy's future, his safety, his chance to grow up in a community that wasn't perpetually shadowed by technological threats from the past. Methadone. Evening settled over Millbrook with golden light filtering through autumn leaves just beginning their transformation. Jack sat on the small balcony outside the apartment watching Tommy fly his latest drone prototype in careful patterns above the garage lot. Frank had joined them for dinner, his presence a welcome buffer against the weight of the decision Jack was still processing. The boy's got a gift, Frank observed, settling into the chair beside Jack. Reminds me of Rebecca, that same focus, that ability to see solutions nobody else notices. Jack nodded, pride momentarily overshadowing his concerns. He designed that guidance system from scratch. Half the engineers I've met couldn't do what he does instinctively. They watched in comfortable silence as Tommy navigated the drone through increasingly complex maneuvers, the small aircraft responding with remarkable precision to his tablet controls. So, Frank said, finally, his tone shifting to something more serious. You gonna tell me what those government types really wanted? Jack glanced at his old friend, unsurprised by the direct question. Frank had known him too long to be fooled by careful deflections. They want me to check out a facility where Westland might be recreating Nighthawk technology, he said quietly, ensuring Tommy remained out of earshot. Off the books, unofficial. Frank's weathered face registered immediate understanding. Back to the old business, then. Just reconnaissance, Jack clarified, though they both recognized the inherent risks in even that limited scope. Confirmation of intelligence evidence gathering if necessary. And you're considering it. It wasn't a question, but Jack answered anyway. If Westland has actually recreated the technology, they could target Melbrook for testing. Another electromagnetic pulse potentially worse than what we've already experienced. Frank's gaze shifted to Tommy, still absorbed in his drone flight. The boy needs his father, Jack, not a hero, a father. The simple truth struck with precision, touching the core of Jack's internal conflict. His military career had ended after a mission gone catastrophically wrong, a judgment call that resulted in civilian casualties, a burden of guilt that had driven him back to Millbrook, seeking redemption through simple, honest work and dedicated parenting. I know, Jack acknowledged quietly, but if I don't help stop this and something happens to Millbrook, to Tommy, there are other ways to address threats, Frank said, other resources you haven't considered. Before Jack could question this cryptic suggestion, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. The screen displayed a number he didn't recognize with a Philadelphia area code. Jack Miller, oh, he answered, professional neutrality masking his curiosity. Jack. Liz Montgomery's voice carried clearly through the connection, sending an unexpected jolt of recognition through his system. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, he replied, gesturing to Frank that he'd take the call privately. As he stepped inside the apartment, he found himself oddly conscious of his surroundings, the modest furnishings, the orderly simplicity of the life he'd built. This is a surprise. A necessary one, I think, Liz responded, her tone carrying an urgency that immediately heightened his attention. I just received some concerning information about Westland defense systems that might affect Millbrook. Has anyone from the government contacted you today? Jack paused, surprised at her prescience competing with cautious instinct. Why do you ask? Because I've just learned that Westland has potentially recreated aspects of the Nighthawk technology, and Millbrook might be at risk. Her directness cut through his hesitation. I'm calling to warn you and to tell you I'm implementing countermeasures. What kind of countermeasures? Jack asked, professional interest overriding personal questions about her 3-week silence. I've fast-tracked the security protocols for our drone facility construction site, Liz explained. Specialized electromagnetic shielding, advanced detection systems, emergency power backups for critical town infrastructure. My team is en route to Millbrook now to begin immediate implementation. Jack processed this, reconciling her information with what Westfield had shared. How did you learn about Westland's activities? A brief hesitation. Let's just say Richard Carmichael isn't the only one with sources inside competitor companies. When his operative was arrested, we did a thorough investigation of all communications. There were references to a backup facility, a contingency plan if the original Nighthawk activation failed. The Department of Defense is aware, Jack confirmed. Deciding transparency served their mutual interest in protecting Millbrook. They approached me today about conducting reconnaissance on the suspected facility. And you're considering it, Liz stated, not a question, but an assessment. Westland's actions threaten my town, my son, Jack replied simply. Yes, I'm considering it. The line went quiet for a moment before Liz spoke again, her voice carrying a new determination. I have a counter-proposal, one that doesn't require you to risk your life playing covert operative for a government agency that will disavow any knowledge if things go wrong. Despite everything, Jack found himself smiling at her accurate assessment of the situation. I'm listening. I'll be in Millbrook tomorrow morning, Liz continued. Not just with my security team, but with evidence we've gathered about Westland's activities, evidence obtained through legal channels that can trigger official intervention. The Pentagon won't need your unofficial reconnaissance if they have documented proof of Westland's illegal weapons development. What kind of evidence? Financial transactions, equipment, purchases, power consumption records, and most importantly, communications between Carmichael and his team, explicitly discussing the recreation of Nighthawk technology. Enough to justify a formal investigation with full legal authorization. Jack considered this alternative, weighing it against Westfield's approach. Why are you doing this? Liz Montgomery Technologies could simply enhance its own security, protect its interests, without involving Millbrook. Her response came without hesitation. Because I made a promise to you, to Tommy, to myself, that I would make things right. My grandfather's company created this technology that has haunted your town for decades. I won't let that legacy cause more harm. The simple honesty in her voice resonated with something in Jack, a recognition of shared values that transcended their different worlds. When will you arrive? He asked finally. First thing tomorrow. I'm leaving Philadelphia within the hour. A brief pause. Is Tommy there? I'd like to say hello if that's okay. The request, personal rather than professional, shifted the conversation's tone. He's outside testing his new drone. He'll be glad to hear from you. He's been talking about showing you his navigation improvements. I've missed him, Liz said softly, then added with careful neutrality, and our conversations. The simple admission hung between them, acknowledging something neither had directly addressed during her time in Millbrook. We've missed you too, Jack replied, the plural both truthful and a safe harbor from more complicated admissions. As he called Tommy in to speak with Liz, Jack found his decision regarding Westfield's request crystallizing. There were multiple ways to address threats, as Frank had suggested, not all requiring a return to shadowy operations and solitary risk-taking. Sometimes protection could come through collaboration, through trusting others with shared concerns, rather than shouldering burdens alone. Tommy's face lit up as he took the phone, immediately launching into technical details about his drone improvements. Watching his son's animated conversation, Jack felt a certainty forming. Whatever happened next with Westland, with Nighthawk technology, with the protection of Millbrook, he would not face it by reverting to old patterns of isolated duty. Too much had changed in the past month, not just in Millbrook's circumstances, but in his own understanding of strength, responsibility, and connection. Dawn had barely broken when the sound of vehicles approaching the garage pulled Jack from sleep. Through his bedroom window, he could see a convoy of unmarked black SUVs and equipment trucks pulling into the lot below. Montgomery Technologies' security team, arriving with military precision. As he dressed quickly, a soft knock at his door revealed Tommy, already awake, eyes bright with anticipation. Liz is here, the boy announced, peering through the blinds at the activity below. And she brought lots of people. I see that, Jack replied, noting his son's excited expression, with a mixture of amusement and something more complex. Let's go say hello. They descended to find the garage lot transformed into an impromptu command center. Technicians unloaded specialized equipment while security personnel established a perimeter. At the center of this organized chaos stood Liz Montgomery, directing operations with the same quiet authority Jack remembered from their crisis collaboration. She turned as they approached, her professional demeanor softening immediately. She wore practical field clothes rather than corporate attire, cargo pants, boots, and a Montgomery Technologies jacket that suggested she expected to be personally involved in whatever lay ahead. Jack, Tommy. Her smile reached her eyes in a way that corporate photographs never captured. Thank you for letting us use your place as a staging area. We'll try not to disrupt your normal operations. Looks like normal operations are going to be disrupted regardless, Jack observed, gesturing toward the activity. This is quite an operation for a simple security upgrade. Before Liz could respond, a familiar black SUV pulled into the lot. Agent Westfield and Lieutenant Commander Rivera, their expressions registering surprise at finding a full technical team already deployed. It seems our government friends have arrived, Liz noted, her tone revealing familiarity with the situation. Perfect timing. Jack glanced between Liz and the approaching agents, pieces falling into place. You knew they'd contacted me. Not specifically, Liz admitted, but I knew they were exploring unofficial approaches while official channels were blocked by Westland's political connections. When I acquired actionable evidence yesterday, I alerted certain Pentagon contacts that a formal operation was now feasible. Westfield approached his practiced neutrality, barely concealing his reassessment of the situation. Ms. Montgomery, this is unexpected. But fortuitous, Liz countered smoothly. My security chief has a briefing package for you, everything you need to justify immediate official intervention at Westland's research facility. Properly obtained through legal channels, fully admissible in any subsequent proceedings. The agent studied her with new calculation. "You've been busy." "I protect my company's interests," Liz replied simply. "And in this case, those interests align perfectly with national security and the safety of Millbrook." Jack watched this exchange with growing appreciation for Liz's strategic approach, not circumventing proper channels, but accelerating them through precisely applied corporate resources. She had effectively transformed a high-risk covert operation into a legitimate law enforcement action, all while positioning Montgomery Technologies as a responsible corporate citizen. "Impressive," Rivera commented quietly to Jack as Westfield reviewed the documentation Liz's team provided. "Your friend managed to accomplish in 24 hours what we couldn't get approved in 3 weeks." "She's resourceful," Jack acknowledged his gaze following Liz as she directed her team while simultaneously briefing Westfield on technical details. Rivera studied him with perceptive assessment. "And important to you." Before Jack could formulate a response to this unexpected observation, Tommy tugged at his sleeve, pointing toward the town's main road where another vehicle approached, this one instantly recognizable even at a distance. "Dad, look," the boy said, confusion evident in his voice. "Isn't that Mom's car?" Jack felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach as the sleek Audi convertible pulled into the increasingly crowded lot. Behind the wheel sat Sarah Miller, or Sarah Carmichael, as she now styled herself since marrying Richard Carmichael 18 months after abandoning her husband and 3-year-old son. She emerged from the car with practiced Grace designer sunglasses and impeccable styling, creating a stark contrast to the practical, purpose-driven activity around her. Her gaze swept the scene, calculating assessment visible even behind the dark lenses. "Jack," she greeted with cool familiarity. "Tommy, sweetheart. What a surprise to find you in the middle of all this." "Excitement." Tommy pressed closer to his father, uncertainty clear in his posture. Sarah's sporadic contact over the years had never included unannounced visits, and her sudden appearance amid this already complex situation sent warning signals through Jack's system. "Sarah," he acknowledged neutrally, "this is unexpected." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Is it? I would have thought Richard's interest in your little town might have suggested I'd eventually come to check on my son." The casual reference to her husband's activities, a tacit admission of knowledge about Westland's operations, confirmed Jack's suspicions. Sarah wasn't here by coincidence. "Your timing is interesting," he observed, positioning himself slightly between Sarah and Tommy. "Considering what's happening with Westland Defense Systems." Sarah's gaze shifted to Liz, who had noticed the new arrival and was approaching with controlled caution. "Montgomery Technologies and my husband's company have always had a competitive relationship. I'm simply concerned about my son being caught in the crossfire." The implication was clear, a threat wrapped in maternal concern, leverage disguised as family interest. "Tommy is perfectly safe," Jack stated firmly, "and not part of any corporate rivalry." "Perhaps," Sarah conceded, removing her sunglasses to reveal eyes as calculating as her tone. "But a custody judge might have questions about a child living in a potential electromagnetic danger zone, and especially one with Tommy's special needs, particularly when an alternative home with advanced medical resources is available." The threat crystallized custody challenges, legal battles Tommy used as a pawn in Westland's corporate strategy against Montgomery Technologies. Jack felt a cold anger building, but before he could respond, Liz stepped forward. "Mrs. Carmichael," she greeted with professional courtesy that did nothing to mask the steel beneath. "Your concern for Tommy's welfare is understandable. That's precisely why Montgomery Technologies has prioritized Millbrook's safety in our security protocols, including specialized health monitoring for all residents, particularly those with unique sensitivities." Sarah's expression cooled further at this direct intervention. "Ms. Montgomery, how convenient to find you personally involved in a small-town security upgrade. One might almost suspect additional interest beyond corporate responsibility." "One might," Liz agreed pleasantly, "just as one might question the timing of your sudden maternal concern coinciding with your husband's questionable technological pursuits." The exchange crackled with tensions, two formidable women assessing each other with precision while maintaining perfect external composure. Tommy, still pressed against Jack's side, watched the interaction with unusual focus, his perceptive mind clearly processing undercurrents beyond the spoken words. "Dad," he said suddenly, his voice carrying unexpected certainty, "Mom's not just here about custody." All eyes turned to the boy whose analytical expression reminded Jack powerfully of Rebecca during her most intense problem-solving moments. "What do you mean, buddy?" Jack asked carefully. Tommy pointed to Sarah's purse, specifically to a small device, partially visible in an outside pocket. "That's a signal booster, the same kind they use for remote drone operations in areas with electromagnetic interference." Sarah's composed expression faltered momentarily, surprise at her son's observation breaking through her careful mask. "The navigation system you helped design," Tommy continued, looking now at Liz. "Mom has the same type of signal extender your engineers use, and she's here right when Westland is trying to attack your drones." The simple observation from a child's perspective crystallized what the adults had circled around. Sarah wasn't merely present as a custody threat or corporate spy. She was actively part of Westland's operation, perhaps serving as a signal relay or trigger mechanism positioned directly in Millbrook. Westfield moved forward immediately, professional caution replacing his previous calculation. "Mrs. Carmichael, I need to see that device, please." Sarah's expression hardened, the pretense of casual visit evaporating. "This is harassment. I'm here to see my son, nothing more." "The device, ma'am," Rivera repeated firmly, her military authority evident. "Or we can discuss it at a secure federal facility." As the confrontation escalated, Tommy turned to Jack, his expression troubled, but determined. "Dad, I think Mom's device is trying to connect to the same frequency as Nighthawk. I can feel it like at the fairgrounds, but different." Jack knelt to his son's level, recognizing the seriousness in his eyes. "What do you mean you can feel it?" "Like electricity under my skin." Tommy explained, his hand unconsciously moving to his temple. "The same feeling when we were near the Nighthawk machine, but more focused." Jack exchanged a quick glance with Liz, who had overheard the conversation. Something in her expression shifted from professional management to genuine concern. "Tommy," she said gently, kneeling beside Jack, "this is important. Can you tell which direction the feeling is coming from?" The boy closed his eyes briefly in concentration, then pointed not towards Sarah's device, but toward the hills beyond the town in the direction of the old fairgrounds facility. "It's not Mom's thing," he said with certainty. "It's something bigger, further away. But it's awake now, and it's looking for the drones." As if in confirmation of Tommy's assessment, alarms suddenly blared from the Montgomery Technologies equipment trucks. Technicians rushed to monitoring stations, calling out readings that painted a disturbing picture. A massive electromagnetic energy signature was building approximately 30 miles west of Millbrook, the direction of Westland's research facility. "They're initiating a test," Liz realized, her voice tight with controlled urgency. "Earlier than intelligence suggested, they must have detected our preparations and accelerated their timeline." Westfield was already on his secure phone protocols, and caution abandoned in the face of imminent threat. "We need that strike team at the Westland facility now. Authorization code Alpha 7 Delta." As organized chaos erupted around them, Jack remained focused on Tommy, whose expression had shifted from concentration to something more concerning: pain. "It's getting stronger," the boy whispered, pressing his hands to his temples. "It's trying to find something to connect with." Liz knelt beside them, her corporate persona completely set aside in favor of genuine concern. "Tommy, the drones at our construction site, they use protocols similar to what Nighthawk would recognize, don't they?" Tommy nodded, wincing slightly. "That's why it wants them. To take control like it was designed to do." A terrible clarity formed in Jack's mind. Westland's recreated Nighthawk system was attempting to establish connection with the Montgomery's drone technology, just as the original system had been designed to do. But Tommy, with his unique neurological sensitivity to electromagnetic fields, was somehow intercepting or sensing this communication attempt. "He's picking up the signal," Jack said quietly to Liz, "like a human receiver." Understanding dawned in her eyes. The medical reports, the rare conditions in families exposed to the original Nighthawk testing. What if they weren't just random effects? What if the system actually created specific neurological changes that were passed down genetically? Like my dad's cancer, Jack realized. Not just radiation damage, but targeted biological modification from prolonged exposure. Their shared revelation was interrupted by Tommy's sudden gasp. The boy's eyes flew open, his expression shifting from pain to surprise. "It's talking to me," he whispered. Not with words, but I can understand it. It's confused, looking for something familiar, but finding me instead. Jack exchanged an alarmed glance with Liz. Whatever was happening, that it was accelerating beyond their understanding or control. Around them, the Montgomery team's equipment continued reporting expanding electromagnetic fields, while Westfield coordinated with his strike team, and Sarah was detained by Rivera, her signal device confiscated. In the midst of this crisis, Tommy stood perfectly still, his expression shifting to one of intense concentration, the same focus he brought to his most complex technical challenges. "I can answer it," he said suddenly, his voice carrying unexpected certainty. "I can make it listen to me instead of looking for the drones." "Tommy, no," Jack began, parental protection overriding all other considerations. "It's too dangerous." But his son's eyes held a determination that transcended his years. "Dad, it's already connected to me. If I don't answer, it will keep searching until it finds the drones. Then everyone gets hurt, like what happened to Grandpa." The echo of the future scene from Tommy's earlier prediction sent a chill through Jack. Before he could formulate a response, Liz placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Jack," she said quietly, "Tommy may be right. His neurological sensitivity could give him a connection to the system that none of our technology can match. If he can communicate with it, maybe he can convince it to shut down. Or it could harm him." Jack countered, the fear in his voice barely contained. "We don't understand what this connection might do to his brain." Tommy's expression softened with a compassion beyond his years. "Dad, I'll be careful, but I have to try. It's like you always say, sometimes one person has to take a risk to protect everyone else." The simple reflection of his own military ethos coming from his 7-year-old son struck Jack with painful clarity. He had always taught Tommy about responsibility and courage, about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Now those lessons were being applied in a context he had never anticipated. "What do you need?" he asked finally, his decision made not from surrender, but from respect for his son's remarkable conviction. Tommy's face brightened with determination. "My tablet, the one I use for drone navigation. I think I can use it to help focus my thoughts, make them clearer for the system to understand." As Jack retrieved the tablet from Tommy's backpack, Liz organized her team to create a protective perimeter, establishing monitoring equipment to track both the distant Westland signal and Tommy's physiological responses. "We'll be right here," she assured both father and son. "At the first sign of danger, we intervene." The tablet powered on in Tommy's hands, its screen immediately filling with strange patterns. Not the normal operating system, but visualization of electromagnetic frequencies that seemed to respond to the boy's touch. He sat cross-legged on the ground, the tablet balanced on his knees, his expression shifting to the deep focus that Jack recognized from his most intense building sessions. "It's afraid," Tommy said softly, his fingers moving across the screen as if playing an instrument. "It was asleep for so long, and now it's being forced to do things it doesn't want to do." Jack knelt beside his son, maintaining physical connection through a hand on his shoulder, while Liz monitored the technical readouts her team was gathering. Around them, the crisis response continued. Westfield coordinating the raid on Westland's facility, Rivera, securing Sarah and her device Montgomery's team, establishing protective measures around Millbrook's infrastructure. But in the eye of this storm, a 7-year-old boy with extraordinary perception had become their most unlikely hope for averting disaster. The world narrowed to a single point of connection. Tommy cross-legged on the asphalt of Miller's auto parking lot, his face illuminated by the strange patterns flowing across his tablet screen. The morning sun cast long shadows as Millbrook awakened to an invisible crisis, most residents unaware of the technological battle unfolding at the edge of town. Jack remained beside his son, one hand steady on the boy's shoulder, his military training allowing him to maintain outward calm despite the storm of concern within. Liz coordinated with her team nearby, her voice low and assured as she directed the deployment of protective measures throughout the town's infrastructure. "Power levels at the Westland facility are still climbing," reported one of the Montgomery technicians, eyes fixed on monitoring equipment. "Electromagnetic signature expanding at approximately 3 miles per minute." "Strike Team ETA," Westfield demanded into his secure phone, his composed federal agent demeanor showing cracks under pressure. 17 minutes, came the terse reply through the speaker. Liz exchanged a glance with Jack. "Too long." If the Westland prototype reached full power before the team could intervene, The resulting electromagnetic pulse would sweep through Millbrook like an invisible tsunami, disabling everything from medical equipment to water treatment systems. Tommy, Jack kept his voice gentle despite the urgency. How are you doing, buddy? The boy didn't look up, his fingers continuing their intricate dance across the screen. It's listening now, he said softly. Not fighting anymore. It recognizes something in me, like family. Jack glanced at Liz, who had moved closer, her expression reflecting the same mixture of wonder and concern he felt. The genetic changes, she murmured. Your father's exposure passed down to Tommy. It was designed to interface with electronic systems, Jack said quietly, the realization crystallizing. And now it's found a human mind that shares its electronic language. Tommy's head tilted slightly, as if listening to something only he could hear. It doesn't want to hurt anyone, he reported. The people controlling it now are forcing commands it doesn't understand. It's trying to resist, but they keep pushing. Can you help it resist? Liz asked, gently kneeling beside them. Tommy nodded, his focus unwavering. I'm teaching it what Dad taught me about making choices that protect people instead of hurting them. About finding better ways to use your strength. Jack felt an unexpected tightness in his throat, his son applying life lessons about ethics and responsibility to an artificial intelligence born of Cold War weapons research. Somehow in this moment of crisis, Tommy had found common ground with a technology designed for destruction. Energy signature at the Westland facility is destabilizing, called one of the technicians. Pattern shifting. It's no longer building toward pulse generation. Liz moved quickly to the monitoring station, studying the readings with intense focus. They're losing control of it, she said, surprise and hope mingling in her voice. The system is rejecting their command protocols. Tommy's doing that, Jack asked, unwilling to leave his son's side. I'm showing it a better tito, Tommy replied before Lizos could answer. His voice carried an unusual resonance, as if speaking from a place of deeper understanding. Not fighting, not controlling, collaborating. Like how my drone processors work together instead of one being in charge. The tablet screen shifted patterns, reorganizing into something more harmonious, less chaotic. Around them, the Montgomery team's equipment registered dramatic changes in the distant electromagnetic field, not collapsing, but transforming, reorganizing into something fundamentally different. Strike team has reached the Westland facility, Westfield announced, one hand pressed to his earpiece. They're reporting all systems in some kind of automated shutdown sequence. Researchers are being detained. Sarah, still held under guard by Rivera, watched her son with an expression caught between disbelief and something more complex, perhaps pride, perhaps regret. He's like his mother, she said quietly, almost to herself. Rebecca always saw patterns no one else could recognize. Jack heard the comment but remained focused entirely on Tommy, whose breathing had accelerated slightly, the effort of concentration taking a physical toll. That's enough, buddy, he said gently. The strike team has it under control now. But Tommy shook his head slightly, determination evident in his posture. Not finished yet, he murmured. It's scared of being put back to sleep, afraid of being used again someday. It needs a purpose. Liz returned to their side, her expression thoughtful. Like what we did with the original Nighthawk, repurposing rather than destroying. Tommy nodded, his fingers still moving across the screen. It can help instead of hurt. It understands electromagnetic fields better than anything we've built. It could protect. A shield rather than a weapon, Jack said, understanding dawning. An electromagnetic defense system rather than an offensive pulse generator. That's brilliant, Liz breathed, immediately grasping the implications. A protective countermeasure against exactly the kind of attack Westland was planning, the perfect defense against its own original purpose. Around them, the Montgomery team's equipment registered new patterns emerging from the distant facility, protective fields rather than destructive pulses, defensive shields expanding outward at a measured pace. It's working. One technician called, amazement evident in her voice. The system is reconfiguring itself into some kind of protective array. I've never seen anything like this. Tommy's hands finally stilled on the tablet, his shoulders relaxing as the connection stabilized. When he looked up at his father, his eyes reflected both exhaustion and accomplishment. It's okay now, he said simply. It found a better purpose, like you did when you came home from the Navy. Jack pulled his son into a gentle embrace, pride and relief overwhelming all other concerns. You did good, buddy. Really good. As the immediate crisis subsided, organization returned to the scene. Westfield coordinated with his strike team to secure the Westland facility and its now transformed technology. Rivera maintained custody of Sarah, whose initial defiance had given way to quiet calculation as she assessed her diminishing options. The Montgomery team continued monitoring the electromagnetic signatures, confirming that the threat had indeed transformed into something protective rather than destructive. Liz knelt beside Jack and Tommy, her corporate efficiency momentarily set aside. Tommy, what you just did was extraordinary. You didn't just stop a threat, you transformed it into something beneficial. That's true innovation. The boy smiled tiredly, leaning against his father's shoulder. The navigation systems we designed together helped me understand how to talk to it. We're a good team. The best, Liz agreed, her gaze meeting Jack's over Tommy's head, something unspoken passing between them. Recognition of shared values, shared purpose, and perhaps something more personal, taking root beneath the professional collaboration. 6 months later, Millbrook's transformation was visible, even to casual visitors. The town square bustled with renewed activity. Storefronts, reopened with fresh paint and new construction, dotted the once declining main street. Most significant was the complex at the edge of town, where the old fairgrounds had stood, now a gleaming research facility, with the Montgomery Technologies logo displayed prominently above the entrance. Inside the main development lab, Tommy Miller adjusted calibration settings on a drone prototype, his small fingers moving with characteristic precision across control surfaces. Beside him, a team of engineers watched with respectful attention as the 7-year-old, now officially designated as a special consultant with his own Montgomery Technologies ID badge, demonstrated modifications to the navigation system. The distributed processing allows each drone to maintain independent function while sharing a collective awareness. Tommy explained his confidence in technical settings having grown substantially over recent months. They can adapt to electromagnetic interference, automatically using the same principles we developed from the Nighthawk reconfigurations. The lead engineer nodded appreciatively, essentially applying biological neural network principles to mechanical systems. Brilliant approach. From his position near the doorway, Jack watched his son with quiet pride. The past 6 months had brought remarkable changes to their lives, not just the economic revitalization of Millbrook through Montgomery's investment, but deeper transformations in their family dynamic. Tommy's unique abilities were now recognized and nurtured rather than merely accommodated. The neurological sensitivity that had once been classified as a disability was understood as an extraordinary gift, particularly valuable in the emerging field of human-machine interface technologies. Specialized schooling, combined with hands-on work at the research facility, had allowed his talents to flourish in ways traditional education never could have supported. He's thriving, Liz observed, joining Jack at the doorway. The team says he's already solving problems that stumped their PhD researchers. Jack smiled, still watching his son. He gets so absorbed he'd forget to eat if they didn't remind him. Just like his mother used to do. Liz's hand found as a gesture that had become natural over the months of collaboration, crisis management, and eventually something much more personal. Her other hand held a tablet displaying the final approval for the Montgomery Healthcare Initiative, a comprehensive program providing specialized medical monitoring and treatment for all Millbrook residents affected by the original Nighthawk testing, with particular emphasis on children exhibiting neurological sensitivity patterns similar to Tommy's. The board unanimously approved the full funding package, she said. 5 years guaranteed with provisions for extension based on community needs assessment. That'll matter to a lot of families here, Jack replied, squeezing her hand gently in acknowledgement, especially those who never understood why their medical issues seemed clustered in certain neighborhoods. They moved from the lobby into the facility's central atrium, where the afternoon sun streamed through skylights to illuminate the space below. The design intentionally incorporated elements of Millbrook's architectural heritage, brick and weathered wood alongside modern glass and steel, honoring the town's past while embracing its future. Sarah's sentencing is tomorrow, Liz mentioned it as they walked. Federal prosecutors are recommending reduced charges in exchange for her testimony against Richard and the Westland executives. Jack nodded, his expression neutral. The legal proceedings against his ex-wife had been one complicated aspect of the past months, particularly explaining the situation to Tommy in age-appropriate terms. Frank mentioned the judge is likely to grant supervised visitation eventually. Limited, but something. How do you feel about that? Complicated, Jack admitted. But Tommy deserves the chance to know his mother even with her flaws. He's perceptive enough to form his own judgments. They reached the facility's rear doors, which open onto a testing field where prototype drones perform complex maneuvers against the backdrop of Millbrook's hills. In the distance stood the old water tower, newly repainted with the town's name and founding date, a symbol of continuity amid transformation. Council meeting tonight, Liz asked, though she already knew the answer. Jack's appointment to Millbrook's town council 3 months ago had added civic responsibility to his already full schedule managing the garage and consulting on security systems for the research facility. 7 o'clock, he confirmed. Mayor Davis wants to discuss the spring festival plans. Apparently your suggestion about showcasing local technology alongside traditional crafts has generated considerable excitement. Liz smiled at this blend of old and new that characterized their approach to Millbrook's revitalization, honoring the community's heritage while creating sustainable paths forward. It reflected their personal journey as well, finding balance between Jack's rootedness in tradition and her innovation-focused perspective. Will you stay the weekend? Jack asked the question casual, but carrying deeper implications. Though Liz now divided her time between Philadelphia and Millbrook, the arrangement remained fluid, evolving as their relationship deepened. Through Monday, she confirmed, I promised Tommy we'd finish the obstacle avoidance programming for his search and rescue drone prototype. Jack's smile carried a warmth reserved for his closest relationships. He's been counting down the days. Apparently the team here doesn't quite understand his methodology the way you do. We speak the same language, Liz acknowledged, technical intuition rather than by-the-book engineering. The observation applied beyond their shared approach to technology, touching on something fundamental in their connection and understanding that transcended backgrounds and circumstances, recognizing complementary strengths rather than focusing on differences. As afternoon light bathed the hills surrounding Millbrook, they watched Tommy emerge from the lab to join the drone, testing, his excitement evident even at a distance. The boy waved enthusiastically when he spotted them gesturing toward a particularly complex maneuver one prototype was executing. He's happy, Jack said, simply the observation containing all that really mattered after the challenges they had faced. We all are, Liz replied, her gaze taking in the renewed town, the thriving research facility, and most significantly, the family that had formed against all odds, a former Navy SEAL turned small-town mechanic, a corporate CEO with a newfound appreciation for community over profit margins, and a remarkable boy whose unique perception had transformed potential disaster into opportunity. In the distance, beneath the hills that had once housed weapons research, the repurposed Nighthawk technology continued its quiet work, no longer a dormant threat, but an active guardian protecting rather than endangering. Like the people who had confronted its legacy, it had found a better purpose, transforming what was designed for destruction into something that preserved and enhanced what mattered most. Tommy jogged toward them, tablet in hand, eager to share his latest breakthrough. As Jack and Liz welcomed him with matched smiles, the final pieces of their unexpected journey fell into place. Not an ending, but a beginning built on the foundation of crisis overcome, trust established, and connections that proved stronger than the forces that had threatened to tear them apart. The Montgomery family legacy and the Miller family future had converged in ways none could have predicted when a hurricane forced their paths to cross. But as Millbrook continued its renaissance around them, that convergence stood as testimony to a simple truth: sometimes rescue comes in unexpected forms, and those saved often become saviors in turn.